Good evening, everybody. Let me make sure that this microphone is up so you can hear me. It's not always possible. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this gorgeous evening. We appreciate you coming down. We're going to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with a non-sectarian invocation. We'll follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd please rise and join me. Thank you for a community that cares about its youth, about its seniors, about its citizens in general. Thank you for gorgeous spring weather. Thank you for returning birds, hopeful sprouts in greenhouses, cats lingering in the sun. Please help us remember tonight to listen graciously, remembering we all want the same thing: good education for our youth, quality of life, friends. Give us guidance and wisdom, reminding us we are all doing the best we can for our community and each other. Thank you. I'm going to pledge. The flag is right back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to note for the record that Mr. Roberts is excused and Miss Major. Oh, is she? Perfect. That's she's running late. But here we go. Okay, Mr. Lejeski?
Here.
Mr. Quist?
Here.
Mr. Tacky?
Here.
Mr. Cooper?
Here.
Miss Major? Here. Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Lawrence?
Here.
And we have from the City of North Pole, Mrs. Heading?
Here.
And from the school board, Mr. Bartles?
Here.
Miss Dodge?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. It is gorgeous out. And we're going to start next with a safety announcement, just so we all remember how to get out in case we have an emergency. We can go out, of course, the doors we came in, the double doors. We also can go through this door, little single door behind this column and little single door behind that column. This one go out and turn to the right. That one go out and turn to the left. That takes us to our consent agenda. So does anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? I see no indication of anyone wishing to do that. Does anyone need to declare a possible conflict of interest for items on the consent agenda? Okay, we don't have anyone declaring conflict of interest. So that takes us to citizens' comments. And many of you will remember we have two different types of citizens' comments. The first one, cleverly titled Citizens' Comments A, are for items that are on the agenda but not up for public hearing. And item B are for items other than those appearing on the agenda, so kind of anything in the universe other than what is on the agenda. So I'm going to open public comments on item A. I have 4 people signed up. We'll go through those 4 people. If there's anyone else that wishes to speak on items on the agenda but not up for public comment, we'll just ask you to come forward after we go through these 4 people. So I'm going to start with John Sassman and then Lori Lang. Could be Lange. Lori Lang. Thank you, Lori. Please come take one of the seats. Yes, please do. Thank you. And we have a new process, possibly since you've been here, everybody. We now have asked you to give us your name and spell your last name and tell us what neighborhood you're in. So, Mr. Sassman, you're first.
Okay, thanks for having me. John Sassman, S-A-S-S-M-A-N, Fairbanks, Alaska. Okay. Okay, I'll start right off. I'm coming to you wearing 3 hats this evening. The first is as a parent. I have 2 daughters, one of which will enter kindergarten next year, and she'll potentially be in a class of 29 5-year-olds. To me, this is simply unacceptable, but I'll come back to that. The second and third hats are a bit shared, personal and professional. 5 years ago, my wife and I decided to move back to Fairbanks after our service in the Peace Corps. We chose Fairbanks because it's where my wife is from, and UF has an excellent school of education. We ultimately decided to stay. Why? Because Fairbanks was an excellent place to raise a family with outstanding schools and teaching opportunities. Since then, I've been working for the school district for 4 years, and every year I've received either a pink slip or a layoff notice. And now I've received notification that I will be involuntary transferred at best this year, with the possibility of non-retention yet again. Make no mistake, I'm a dedicated professional that goes to work every day for the kids in our community, and I love what I do. I care deeply about every student, and I give it my all every day, often sacrificing time with my own family, and yet I'm annually informed that my task of educating our next generation of leaders is not valued enough to be funded. I bonded with my kids, my community, my colleagues, and my school. I'm all in, fully vested, and it hurts to be forced out. I love being able to see the kids I've helped in the halls and watch them grow up, and I love having siblings of former students and reconnecting with parents as time has passed. I'm only at the start of my teaching career, with many wonderful years ahead. I have passion, drive, and determination. I'm your next generation of teacher and community member, and you're pushing me away. How can I, in good conscience, encourage others to become teachers or even move to Fairbanks so they can be frustrated, deflated, and disheartened every year? Imagine if every spring you didn't know the fate of your employment, how hard it would be to go to work. Yet I do, with a smile on my face, pretending that all is okay, so my students can still learn and enjoy school. How are we? Here we are, rather. 4 years in a row, 3 weeks left, and I still don't know if I have a job or where it will be next year. Lastly, if you decide to fund our school at $41 million, it will be devastating. I definitely will not have a job. The school district's budget proposal has already cut us short by asking for only $50 million because it's realistic. But what is realistic? There will still be 50 teaching positions cut and larger class sizes and other programs. Just so you realize, the school district actually needs $68 million to function status quo, and they have justified their budget reserve balance adequately, in my opinion. Also, my opinion as a taxpayer, voter, parent, teacher, and community member is that the borough should step up and provide what our kids need so our schools can serve them the education they deserve. Thank you for your time and all that you do for our community. I know it's hard to be up here too.
Perfect timing, Mr. Sassman. And thank you for coming down. I'm sure there's some questions before you go. Let's just see. Mr. Quist has a question.
Thank you for your testimony and your service. I don't envy your position in getting pink slips every year. I know it must be very difficult. I've got a couple of questions. Do you plan or have you made these remarks to the Board of Education?
Yes, almost identically.
Oh, you already have?
Yes, I have, on 2 separate occasions.
Okay. So I guess I'm kind of curious about this. Okay, so are you aware of the tax revenue cap and the implications that has for borough revenue?
Oh, definitely. I do follow, and I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, so I'm fully aware of how
Okay,
that
so
works.
then just one more. So then additional funding is going to come from a fund balance one place or the other. Let's say beyond 50 million or what have you, right? Given that the borough is, the umbrella agency in a way, okay, in terms of fund balance and backstopping funds for the school district and not the other way, I'm curious why a fund balance draw is more appropriate from, the reserve account, in your opinion.
From the school district?
You made a comment that you thought that the school district's justification of their use of fund balance for this year and years going forward was adequately defended in your opinion. The implication of which, given your other statements about how we should increase funding, make me think that you think we should take it out of the borough fund balance. And I'm curious why you think, why that's a more rational position.
Well, I think everybody should be coming to the table to fund what we need, meaning to remain status quo. We've had 4 years of reductions and cuts since I started teaching. And if we cut again, we're going, meaning the school district needs to pony up a little bit more from their fund balance. The borough needs to pony up a little bit more from their fund balance. Hopefully the legislature comes through and will approve a $100 increase in the BSA. And if all 3 of those things magically happen, then maybe we can stay the same. I'm just asking stay the same, because if we cut 50 more positions, class sizes are going up and programs are being cut. And I'm not saying that the borough should do it all on their own. I'm not saying you guys come up with everything. But the district's got to come up with more, the borough's got to come up with more, and the state have to come up with more, because what's happening is not enough. Something has to be done. Now, what that looks like is kind of up to you folks. I have suggestions. That's another meeting. But what it looks like comes from you guys, whether that be any kind of tax increase or revenue or whatever, some kind of other revenue generating to go into schools needs to happen. And like I said, I don't know what that looks like.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Sassman, you've stated that the school budget has been decreased for the last 4 years. Are you aware that the unexpended fund balance or the funds surplus this last year, or at the close of last fiscal year, was 31 million, and the year before it was 17 million?
I am aware of that.
Okay, so given that, are you okay with the school budget being reduced the last 2 years?
Well,
Not this upcoming year, I'm talking about the last 2 years.
so it's my understanding that there is a plan for this money, and it's been slowly being spent to kind of lessen the impact of each year, the decreases. And it's also my understanding that it's important for organizations to have a little bit of savings for a rainy day.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sure.
But what was left on the table 2 years ago was unspent was $17 million, and last year was $31 million. Right? So I guess, when Mr. Quist brought, you say you think the school district's position on fund balance is justified. I can't put this in a question. Are you aware there's a lot of people in this community, including some on the school board, who don't agree with that?
I agree. That is true. The way they justified it, to my understanding, the way I perceived it, was that there's this balance, and they have a plan for spending it each year, a little bit at a time, not knowing what they're going to get from the state going back into that balance. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns that have to do with in the future, but I'm talking about what's happened over the last 2 years.
Oh, I'd love for them to spend a little bit more next year. Like I said, it would be great if you guys could provide what we needed. They could add a little bit more from their. I'll speak again at the borough meeting or at the school district meeting and advocate for that too, because I think everybody needs to pony up some more.
All right, well, thank you. I urge you to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Sassman? Mr. Lejeski has a question for you. He's down there.
Sorry.
That's okay.
How much were you thinking that if no one advocated for something other than the default path, how much were you thinking we were going to allocate to the school district?
How much was I thinking?
Yeah, that we would if no one put pressure on us.
Well, if no one put pressure on you, the way the school district had presented their budget proposal was that we're going to ask for what's realistic. With what's realistic is what they thought would be 50 million, and then you guys came back with it could be 41, and then it's like, oh, look out, we're cutting a lot more than what we even thought. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so let's get into it. So I guess I'm kind of asking, do you think that $41 million that's on the table tonight is a serious proposal?
It seems serious to me. Serious enough for me to come here and say, please don't. Yeah, because I know for a fact I want a job. Because I'm the first year of tenured teachers, and if that 41, they're cutting deep, and if I'm out of a job.
So it could be that it's useful to answer a technical question here about what the purpose of the solution with a minimum budget is. Ms. Dolan, would you please So let me explain to everybody. Our role when we're taking community or public comment is for us to just ask questions and to hear what you have to say. We can ask questions of staff if it's a technical question, and they can help us with information that's useful to all of us in understanding what's going on. So, Ms. Dolan, would you speak to the role of the minimum funding resolution?
If I understand you correctly, I think you just kind of want an overview of the law. So within 30 days of receiving the school district's budget, the Assembly has to adopt a resolution setting the minimum amount of funding to be available for education. If it doesn't do that, then the amount in the district's budget is the amount that will get appropriated for education. Otherwise, it's just that resolution is just a floor. It's the minimum amount that you can give. You can always give more, which the total amount that is appropriated as part of your overall budget has a line for education, and that is the actual amount that is appropriated to education.
And are you aware that at this time that the budgeted amount for the school district is at $50 million?
It's to my understanding that's what it's set for right now, or well, allocated. But the vote still needs to be coming up whether or not we have to, if you're going to do the minimum, or if you're going to put it at the 50, and it hasn't even been proposed to provide more. Because the maximum is 68 million. Is that the maximum?
I think that's
It's a
correct.
different
It's by,
question,
yeah, it's by
So-
statute. The minimums and maximums
Statutory.
are by statute.
And I had heard that statutorily that was the max.
I believe so.
Any other questions for Mr. Sassman? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for your service and for your caring for the kids.
Thank
and
you
families.
for listening and
we appreciate it,
having a conversation.
and we certainly value your experience.
Thank you.
So next up, I have Thalia Yang. If you'd like to take the other seat, Miss Lang, thank you for joining us. Please give us your name, spell your last name, and tell us your neighborhood, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lori Lang. That's Lange, and I live in Birch Hill. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Borough Assembly. My name, as I said, is Lori Lang, and I'm a social studies teacher at Tanana Middle School. I would like to address you this evening on behalf of my 2 8th grade U.S. history classes. On Thursday, April 12th, we read and discussed Mayor Castle's original resolution to fund the schools at a minimum of $40 million. The students were stunned to find the difference in funding between what the Borough Assembly had already stated, and isn't the last whereas, and what Mayor Castle was proposing. The next day, they brainstormed what they could do to advocate on behalf of school funding for themselves, their fellow students, and for the school district. Fourth period settled on 3 ideas: the social media group, the petition group, and the commercial group. Social media brainstormed about what online platforms they used and how they could get the word out. The commercial group wrote and filmed a commercial, which has been posted on Tanana's YouTube channel. The petition group created a petition, which they circulated around Tanana and told students about the funding issue and had students sign the petition. This petition contained 13 pages of signatures I delivered to the borough clerk, and you have hopefully received these digital copies that were scanned in and sent to you. Fifth period developed 2 ideas: the social media group and the t-shirt group. The social media group did much the same as fourth period social media group, trying to boost the signal, and the t-shirt group had everyone design a t-shirt. They settled on 2, which they proceeded to create, and you see before you now. One shirt reads, "Every penny counts," which my husband is wearing, contains the borough number and hashtag FNSB with the words, "Said 51 million, giving 41 million, I need money for my education." The other reads, "All opinions matter," which is the one I'm wearing, hashtag FNSB, the borough phone number, and the statement, "They are taking $10 million from our schools." My students were motivated to advocate for what is important to them. I know they are learning that their voices matter. I hope you will listen to their viewpoints and respond accordingly. School funding, or the lack thereof, affects not only amazing teachers and their families now, but also student opportunities for the future. So let's focus on creating a positive, challenging environment for each of our students and a safe and encouraging place to let talented and caring teachers flourish. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there are questions for you. Yes, Mr. Lajewski and Mr. Lawrence.
I guess I'll ask the same one. What do you think we're on track to fund the school district at?
Well, the original resolution, as has been stated, was for 41 million. And then the second resolution that I received today, the proposed substitute by Matt Cooper, is at 50 million.
Can I ask a technical question? Maybe the attorney could help out.
Give it a shot. We'll see.
I'm curious, how often in the past have we funded at the guaranteed minimum level?
I don't know the answer to that without going through and doing some historical research. I don't know offhand.
Mr. Mayor.
I don't ever remember us funding at that level, even once, ever. Can't swear to it, and it only goes back 30 years or so, but
Lightweight, huh? Mr. Lawrence, you had a question?
Ms. Lang, you're aware of the fund balances in the school's budget, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that last year they cut they cut jobs, they cut spending, and at the same time they increased their savings from $17 million. Just a second. I think it's from $17 million to $31 million.
Correct.
How does that make you feel?
I was forced from my high school teaching job at Lathrop into Tanana, which I went kicking and screaming, but it has been actually a wonderful opportunity at Tanana. But I felt the cuts, and I've been cut every year as well. Practically, I only survived one of them at Lathrop, one of the cuts, but when they cut 10 and a half teachers from Lathrop, there was no way I could survive that.
But do you understand that there's a lot of reason to say that was the school board's decision that caused that to happen? And
I understand
not,
there's conflicts on both sides and a tug of war, money-wise, and I have my own opinions, as the previous speaker did as well, as to how we could possibly get past this. But as for right now, we're just seeking to make sure that school is funded.
Okay, and you will be talking to the school board, right?
Yes, my students, hopefully we'll go in that direction as well.
Okay.
It's up to them if this has been at their they're moving. So
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quist has a question for you. He's over here.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks for your testimony and your service. So you know that the mayor's budget had the $50 million value and not this 41 that's in this resolution?
Well, the last whereas states that the Borough Assembly had decided on the 50 million or 51, I think it's 51 million for the original resolution, the statement, the last whereas, and then it said that the minimum funding was 40 million. And so that's what the students were like surprised to see the difference between the two.
So then you're also aware that in Finance Committee, we recommended that 50 million, like this body sits as a Finance Committee, and then we recommended to ourselves as the Assembly that $50 million value.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Lang? Seeing none, thank you. And please tell your students that the T-shirts are lovely.
Thank you.
But we don't want to fund education with T-shirt sales.
No.
Yeah, I don't think it would do too well. Mr. Prox, let me try and get that right. Mr. Prox, you have the next seat, right, the next empty seat. Thalia, please give us your name and spell your last name and give us your neighborhood. Thank you.
Thalia Yang, Lange, and I live at Fairhill. Not Fairhill, Bridge Hill. Gosh.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes, and we're here to listen.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Thalia Yang from Lathrop High School, and ever since I can remember, I have loved to learn. I grew up in an environment where I was encouraged to be curious and grow and discover the world around me. So when I heard what was happening to our school district, I wanted to stand up and say my opinion. Our budget is struggling. We're on the brink of personalized learning, and K-8 schools are about to emerge. With all these ideas and visions circling around our school education system, we look for places to cut. That way we have money to work out what we find important. Cut more teachers, offer less classes, and because of these decisions, our district is becoming cutthroat. I would first like to acknowledge the fact that I am an honor student, and I would love to take AP classes. Next year, I was supposed to be taking AP Euro, but because only 21 people signed up, we are not allowed to have it in the future. And that is not an offered class anymore, and I have no way to go and get more people to sign up. So even if we did get enough people, we would not be allowed to have that class. Chemistry, AP Chemistry is also on the brink of extinction, and we have many other AP classes and classes that are going to be cut because not enough people want to sign up. And I believe that Lathrop has innovations, and it is funded. And I believe that because it should be equal amongst people who are thriving and people who are struggling. They should have equal opportunities to get to the place that they want to be. I also believe that music and choir and band are very close to being cut. And I think it is very important and that it also should be funded. And to teachers, I believe teachers are very important. And a lot of them are being cut. And I think that is totally unfair because we have classes. I am surrounded by so many people every day at Lathrop, and my classes are very large. We need more classes. We need more teachers to sustain the amount of people in Lathrop. If we keep on cutting classes and keep on cutting teachers, we're going to be left in very large classes. And we want to get personalized learning. And in order to get personalized learning, we need smaller classes so that we can get on a personal level with our teacher. But if it's 40 to 1 teacher, how are we supposed to make that bond? How are we supposed to learn properly? Thank you for listening and bearing with me, and I hope you consider my thoughts.
Thank you. You did a great job. Let's see if there are any questions for you, Ms. Lang. Mr. Lejeski has a question for you.
So along those same lines as the others, do you think we're seriously considering $41 million as a annual payment or, for this year's payment to the school district?
I do not know. All I believe is that my education is as important as the people in the future. And right now should be paid for, as well as the kids that are toddlers right now. They should be cared for, but so should my education. And I think that...
Breathe, it's fine. You're doing well. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any other questions for Ms. Lang? Seeing none, we really appreciate you coming down and sharing with us and hopefully solve this. Thank you. Okay. Next I have, no one else has signed up. So if anyone else wishes to speak on items on the agenda not up for public comment, now's a good time to take an empty seat. Mr. Prox. Did I get Ms. Prox? I have a tradition of getting Mr. Prox's name wrong. But
As in Philadelphia.
thank you. Mr. Prox, would you please give us your name and address, or I'm sorry, your name, spell your last name, and your neighborhood?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Prox, last name is spelled Prax, and I live in the Badger Road neighborhood. And, well, I'll start off with the issue. It makes me, I wasn't going to say I'm not too happy with what's being taught, but I'm not too happy with what's being taught given what I heard tonight. But the issue tonight is the process of the minimum level that the assembly commits to for the school district. And if the original resolution is 41 million, if you commit to 10 million more, that's taking the school district budget out of the debate for the next time you meet, which is for the rest of the budget. And a big item I know on the budget right here is going to be, for instance, Mary Sy. And there's going to be people that are wanting to force you to spend or force me to spend money for Mary Sy coming in next week. And they're not going to be talking they're not going to be able to have the discussion of should we spend money on Mary Sy or should we spend money on the school if you raise this to 50 million tonight. So it's a process question. And it's a tough one. I understand, been on your side of the rail there. But it is really important to focus on the process so that the rest of the community that expects the debate and the decision to be made the next time you meet, not tonight, they have an opportunity, an equal opportunity as the people that came down here tonight. So it's a process issue. You should not raise the amount to the 50 million at this meeting. And I appreciate the argument the gentleman made about layoff notices, but you know, I got laid off. That's reality. When you propose bond issues, they design a building and they put additives in there, and if it comes in at X cost for the base, we can have other things added to it. That's life. Life is full of uncertainty. It's tough, but there's no reason that they should be exempt from that. The rest of the community isn't exempt from that. Teaching junior high school students to just come down and beg for money, that angers me, especially going to Mr. Lawrence's point that it could very well be argued that the school district, for some oddball reason, is laying off teachers and putting money in the bank and then blaming it on the assembly. There's something deceptive about that. There's something very wrong with our school system when that happens.
Thank you, Mr. Prox. Did I get it right?
Did.
Okay, I think I may have it right. Any questions for Mr. Prox? I don't see any. Thank you. I appreciate you coming down. And we have another empty seat on items on the agenda, but not up for public comment if you wish to speak on that.
These are items that are not on the agenda?
They are on the agenda, but not available for public comment. So like resolutions, the memoranda, bid awards, unfinished business, items postponed to previous meetings, reconsideration or notice of interest. Mr. Prox will help you. Mr. Prox will help you. I'm sorry. Mr. Calder.
Now you've got me confused.
Yeah, please give us your name and address for the, your name, spell your last name, and give us your
Scott
name.
Calder,
and
C-A-L-D-E-R, Esther area.
Thank you, Mr. Calder.
And regarding Resolution 2018-17, the one addressed by the previous speaker, resolution specifying the minimum amount of money to be made available, et cetera, to the school district. Just right off the top, I noticed that the original resolution takes 20 whereases, and the substitute takes 14 whereases. So I don't know if there's any economy in that, but I just wanted to make that observation. And all of the whereases are very interesting, and I noticed that in some of them, it says that the school district has approximately 300% of what would be a conventional funding reserve. One of the whereases says that it's would be recommended that the school district would have approximately 5% of its operating expenses on hand, and that this pot of money that is under discussion is something like 14%. And so it's conspicuous to me that there would be this, large amount of money kind of sitting around somewhere when people are talking about closing things and tearing them down. And I think Mr. Prox is observant to raise the Mary Sy question. That's something that a lot of people care about, and that issue occurs in the public interest in denominations of several millions of dollars. So the circumstance of just having millions of dollars laying around in places, and I don't have an explanation for why the school district would be on some kind of an austerity budget when they've got that kind of money laying around. So perhaps there would be some valid questions to present in that regard. So I appreciate your time and your deliberations on all the issues that everybody cares about.
Thank you, Mr. Calder. Let's see if there are questions for you. Seeing none, thank you for coming down. We appreciate it. Does anyone else wish to speak on items that are on the agenda but not available for public comment? Come on down, please. So this is, again, memoranda, bid awards, unfinished business. Thank you. Your name and spell your last name, please.
Yeah, my last name is Mendez, M-E-N-D-E-Z.
Thank you. And your first name?
Johnny.
Johnny, thank you, Johnny. And what neighborhood do you live in?
In the Gulfstream area.
Super, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
I'm just here to, express my support to the substitute resolution from Assemblymember Matt Cooper for the school district funding at $50 million. I think that's what the school district, or close to what the school district had requested. I believe that our schools are one of the most important economic engines here in our state because our kids are our greatest resource. So if we shortchange them and decrease the funding to their education, then we're not going to go anywhere as a state. There's all this talk about, where our economy is not doing that good. We need more ideas on how to improve our state's economy beyond resource development and oil. And those ideas are not going to come if our brightest kids just leave and go elsewhere. So I really encourage you to support this funding level, and it will improve the chances of retaining highly qualified teachers, like one that we have here today, saw back there. We have great teachers in our schools, and they won't stay here if they don't know next year if they'll have a job or not, if they get pink slipped every year. That's no way to retain a highly qualified workforce. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez. Let's see if there are questions for you. Mr. Wojcicki has a question.
Sure. If we pass the guaranteed 41 million in funding minimum, what level of funding do you think, if you were a predictor, right, that the assembly would be likely to eventually settle on?
I think we need to fund the school district at what they requested, because there's other unknowns out there, like state funding, and I don't know if that's
Maybe I can restate that. If we pass the guaranteed $41 million funding, the guaranteed minimum of 41 million, do you think we will actually go through with 41 million, or do you think it'll be something above that?
You guys could settle on something below that, maybe. So I think we need to start at 50. I don't know if I understood your question.
Thank you. Any other questions from Mr. Mendez? Seeing none, thank you for coming down. We appreciate it. Does anyone else wish to speak on items not on the agenda but not available for public comment? Looks like we have another taker. Thank you. Please give us your name and spell your last name and tell us your neighborhood.
My name is Janine Ruge, and I live over in the Denali Elementary School District neighborhood. So, last name is Ruge, R-U-G-E. Thank you. It's my first time ever coming to an assembly meeting today, so forgive me for not knowing processes and being a little bit unaware. I'm going to speak on what I know, and I'm a taxpayer. And of all the options that I'm aware of right now that are on the table would be one that would be setting or raising or lowering the floor for education funding. So while I'm not aware of all the other options that are on the table, I do want to point out the fact that I don't think that we are going to be hitting the minimum for the budget that you guys are going to be setting at the 41 or the $50 million. But I would prefer that if we could raise it, that would be great. Minimums are set so that we have a fallback. So if it's possible to not have it set at the lowest possible minimum, that'd be great. I don't know. So I apologize. Very nervous. This is
You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing just great.
So taxpayer, I always vote to raise my taxes for education. I prefer to any budget cuts not to come from education if possible. So that's pretty much all I got to say.
Okay, let's see if there are questions for you. So I saw the mayor and then I saw Mr. Lawrence. You can defer to Mr. Lawrence if you prefer.
That's all right. So at the end of a year, there's typically some money left over. We call it a lapse. We have it in our budget. School district has it in theirs. They lapse funds that they did not spend for whatever reason. They didn't spend them. Understanding that, give or take some change, $8 million of money in our budget equates to 1 mil in the mill rate. And so if we have a large lapse at the end of the year, we've overtaxed the community some amount. And I'm wondering what you think is an appropriate amount of lapse at the end of the year for reasonable burden on the community, one way or the other. How much should the school district lapse or not use of the money that we tax the community for and put in their budget?
So forgive me, but can you repeat that one more time because it went a bunch of different segues. So give me a shot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is confusing. But so 1 mil on your property tax equals $8 million, give or take. And I'm wondering what's a reasonable amount of money for the school district to lapse in a given year, money that we tax the community, put in their budget, or the assembly taxed the community and put in their budget, and then they didn't use it. What that would be the amount of their lapse. What do you think is a reasonable amount of money if you're responsible budgeting, et cetera? How much lapse should you have at the end of the year?
You know, while I do feel that that's a very good question, I don't feel like I'm somebody that's qualified to answer that. I have not investigated any of the information on that, so I don't have a clue.
All right, I respect that. Thank you.
Absolutely fair answer. Mr. Lawrence.
And it's Ms. Ruge?
Ruge.
Ruge.
Yes, thanks.
How do I put this in question form? Well,
so we have to ask questions. That's why you hear them say this.
All right. Have you spoken before the school board this year regarding this matter?
I have not. This is my first opportunity to be present at any public hearing.
Okay.
So.
And you're aware that you will have opportunities to speak before the school board on their budget?
Yes.
In the next few weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's not a question. I urge you to do so.
Thank you.
Because
You say, are you aware that I urge you to do so?
yeah, I mean, are you aware that from the perspective of the borough administration and most of this assembly, the decision to make cuts in teachers and other areas are decisions that are being made by the board, not by us?
I am not aware of them.
Okay. Well, that's our belief. So, thank you.
Mr. Wojcicki has a question for you.
So I want to give you two scenarios and ask you what are the practical benefits, and it goes back to directly to what you said. So the one scenario is we guarantee minimum $51 million, and then we actually fund $50 million. The other scenario is in a few weeks, or right now we guarantee 50, and then in a few weeks we again confirm 50. So what are the practical benefits of going to a guaranteed 50 tonight?
You know what, to be honest, I don't know the ins or outs of the 41 versus the 50, so I don't really know what the pros or cons are. My understanding is that if I voice my opinion that education is important to me as a taxpayer, then that might help in the consideration for whatever you guys choose to be the best option tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I'm ignorant on this, so I just wanted to say, I trust you guys know more than I do.
We all were there once trying to figure this out. And it seems to me that, I'm trying to figure out the question though. Is uncertainty kind of the underlying answer to the question of why a higher number, a higher floor is better than a lower floor? I mean, certainty to the community and to the teachers and the students is of benefit And if we were to approve a higher level rather than lower level, would you agree that would lend some certainty?
Yeah, if you approve a higher level, therefore giving it more importance in the budget, then that would indicate to me that you feel that the education is a high priority.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. I'm sorry, I had Mr. Quist on the list and I forgot, and then I have Mr. Bartels.
Thank you for your testimony. So I'm going to ask you a budget question, but you don't have to answer or be informed. This is kind of a common sense question, maybe. So what do you think about the school district making cuts over the last 4 years while at the same time increasing their fund balance?
The fund balance being the savings?
Yeah, the savings account has grown over the last 4 years. Year after year, they've been, having extra money, at the same time been cutting services. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't necessarily consider creating a savings account surplus money. It's more of something that's creating a safeguard for the future to try to maintain a certain level of education. I don't think that making cuts in order to create a savings account is necessarily a bad thing. There should be a cushion. If we can increase the budget, then we can also increase the savings while cutting less. If that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. And I've got an unrelated one. Did you receive an email or a text message from the school district in any way encouraging you to come testify today?
I received an email and a text that indicated that there would be an assembly meeting tonight and that this would be an item that would be discussed. So
okay.
Yes, I don't know that it specifically said come, but this would.
I read the message.
Okay, good. Thank you. I was trying to remember what the wording was.
Anyways, thank you for the answer.
Mr. Bartels.
It's not a question, but I'd be happy to answer any question. But it's more of a comment. Our next meeting is May 1st, and I would love to see Ms. Rugi there.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thanks.
That's what we call technical information. Thank you. That's perfect. Any other? Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Since Mr. Bartels, yes. As far as the public giving testimony on the school budget, May 1st would be an opportunity.
That we would have a public testimony. They could come and talk.
Okay. What other days in May? Your final budget's going to be adopted in what, May 25th?
And let me preface this with I don't have the agendas in front of me. So, but our next meeting would be May 1st, and then I believe it's May 8th, and then after that it's going to be the 22nd. So there's three dates in May that we will be conducting a meeting.
Okay. And would the public be able to testify at all three of those meetings?
7 o'clock. Yes, they would, because even if it's an agenda item, you might have to wait till the item comes before on the floor. But yes.
All right. Thanks.
Any other
We
questions?
welcome that. So thank you, Ms. Rugi.
Any other questions for either Ms. Rugi or Mr. Bartels or staff? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming down. We appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time and thank you for your patience. It's something that's important to the community.
It is. Thank you. We appreciate it. So, is there anyone else that wishes to speak on items not on the agenda, not up for a public hearing? Seeing none, we're going to close public hearing, and we have by code to recess in about 3 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and read our consent agenda and open public hearing on our regular agenda at 7. So that's just letting you know where we are. Yes.
Are we reading the consent
Yeah,
agenda
that's
now?
what we're going to do next. Do you have something you need to declare?
I need to
I think
declare.
that.
I missed that earlier. I apologize. I
So,
need to declare
does anyone need to
conflict.
declare a possible conflict of interest for items on the consent agenda?
I need to declare a conflict of interest. Thank you.
And what item might that be?
Ordinance number 2017-20-2C.
18B.
Okay, all right, let us all find
Under consideration of calendar
On new
item
business?
18B.
Okay, item B, 18B. Okay, it looks like we probably don't have any discussion about that, Ms. Dolan. We agree.
I would think it's a conflict given that it's a contract with the U.S. Army Garrison at Fort Wainwright, and Ms. Major holds a high position in that organization.
So, thank you. We'll excuse you from voting on the consent agenda, I think. Anybody else need to declare conflict of interest for items on the consent agenda? Seeing none? Yes.
Yeah, we'll order at the beginning. I was catching up with you. Thank you.
Okie doke. So, are there any other items to be removed from the consent agenda before it's read? I don't see anybody raising their hand. Clerk, would you please read the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under communications, we have IFB number 18034, Tanana Lakes Musical Playground rebid. Approval of base bid as submitted by Weber Inc. in the amount of $149,450. We have IFB number 18029, Badger Road Transfer Site Expansion. The approval of base bid as submitted by Groundhogs LLC in the amount of $168,585.35. We have IFB number 18030, Esther Transfer Site Expansion. Approval of base bid as submitted by M&M Constructors in the amount of $145,793. We have a memorandum from Mayor Castle recommending the appointment of Patricia Thurman to the Historic Preservation Commission. We have a memorandum from Mayor Castle recommending the appointment of Enlo Walker to the Health and Social Services Commission. And we have a memorandum from Catherine Dodge, presiding officer, recommending appointment to the Assembly Board of Ethics. For consideration of calendar new business resolutions, we have Resolution 2018-21, a resolution supporting the Alaska Commission on Aging, fiscal year 2019 advocacy priorities, and asking for the Interior Delegation to support these priorities. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Consideration of calendar new business ordinances to be referred to committees or commissions. Ordinance 2018-14, an ordinance amending the Fairbanks North Star Borough Code Title 18 to define brewery, brew pub, and microbrewery, and to add brew pubs and microbreweries as permitted uses in various zones. Sponsors Mayor Castle and Assemblymember Lujeski. Refer to the Planning Commission with the recommendation due back no later than June 14th, 2018. Consideration of calendar ordinances to be introduced in advance to a public hearing. We have ordinance 2018-13 and ordinance amending various portions of chapter 2.32 Fairbanks North Star Borough Code Personnel System. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Refer to the Committee of the Whole on June 7th, 2018, advance to June 14th for public hearing. We have ordinance 2017-20-2C and ordinance amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget by appropriating $106,177 of fund received from the U.S. Army Garrison Fort Wainwright to the Capital Projects Fund for the interconnection of 911 systems and authorizing the execution of a contract change order with Microdata GIS in excess of $100,000. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Refer to the Finance Committee on June 7th, 2018, advance to June 14th, 2018 for public hearing. Then we have ordinance 2017-20-2D, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget by appropriating $260,251 in federal pass-through grants and $25,834 in state matching funds to the Transit Enterprise Projects Fund to acquire 4 new paratransit vans. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Refer to the Finance Committee on June 7th, 2018, advance to June 14th, 2018 for public hearing, and that concludes your consent agenda.
Move to approve the agenda and consent agenda. Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Kaki. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda as read? Seeing none.
It was great.
Oh, did you move it? Would you like me to? Oh, I stand corrected. Mr. Gray seconded that. With that, we are adjourned until, we're recessed until 7 o'clock. Okay. We're going to call our meeting back to order. It is approximately 7 o'clock on this beautiful evening. It's April 26th, 2018. Mr. Turney? You can't hear so well. Okay, we're going to start with reports from representatives. And our first representative is Ms. Thalia Yang, our representative from the City of Fairbanks. Do you have a report today?
Good evening.
Good evening.
With regard to the changes to the marijuana number of licenses and distances and whether or not we're going to have marijuana establishments that permit smoking, we had another 2-hour meeting this past Monday before our regular City Council meeting. So testimony is now closed. And at May 7th, we'll be voting on the ordinance. And I can't tell you what's going to happen because I think there's going to be a lot of amendments.
Okay.
Other than that, that's all I have for a report.
Thank you. That takes us to the City of... Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Lawrence has a question for you.
Mr. Arian, regarding the existing ordinance, as it exists now, the marijuana ordinance, what are the sensitive activities or uses that the ordinance wishes to protect, and what are the distances proposed at this point?
Proposed at 750.
From
the various sensitive uses. And it also proposes, right now the mayor has limited the number of establishments that sell retail to 12, though there's probably 19 in the works. There's 7 establishments already, a couple that are in the process of being approved, and there's anywhere, depending on how you count it, anywhere from 7 to 9 extra licenses that are in the works before the ABC board are in the process of getting the hearings.
And you say the distance proposed is 750 feet from all sensitive uses?
I believe so, yes. Right now, it was 1,000. It's been reduced by the mayor's amendment to 750.
And those sensitive uses, I presume, are schools, daycares, churches?
Yes.
What else?
I believe they also include treatment facilities.
All right, thanks.
Do they also include residential? It seemed like that was listed.
Yes.
Yeah, residential. Mr. Mayor and then Mr. Quist.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mr. Arian. Has the City Council looked at any maps or aerial photographs delineating exactly what it would look like with these different buffer zones that you're discussing?
Yes. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at 1,000 feet, there's very few places left in the city that would qualify for a retail establishment.
Okay.
So that's why there's the change in the number of feet. And also, it's as the crow flies.
Okay. I would just offer that if you need any maps to be able to, objectively evaluate what on the ground any of these buffer zones would look like, that our planning department would be glad to produce those for you, and then you would know exactly what you were voting on.
Thank you very much. I believe we do have some maps that were already prepared, but I'll inform the mayor and I'll get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quist.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. I've got a question. So given that the state in creating these licenses and the number of licenses issued chose not to replicate what a lot of people view as being a mistake with alcohol licenses by making like an artificially limited number, do you think that distinction, or maybe, for lack of a better phrase, like that evolution of the policy over the decades, so now we're in this new place, do you think that in any way should inform your decision in adopting kind of the old model?
Well, the arguments are persuasive on both fronts. There's the argument that there should be no limit, that the market should decide. My personal feelings is that since there's so many people that have already spent the money, didn't know that we were going to bring this ordinance forward, that we might say, you have until X number of days to present your application or not have a limit or grandfather in the ones that have already been. But there hasn't been any discussion by the council yet. We've only been taking testimony. And the other argument is that it should be treated like alcohol. And then the counter argument to that is whether or not we're going to increase the monetary value of those licenses is the way that there is liquor. And so that's another counter argument.
So, if I may, so I'm not trying to make an argument at all. I was just trying to, you're getting at kind of what I was trying to ask, and it's that like an artificial value of a license, and I guess, so I'll ask just your opinion. I don't expect you to speak for the council or anybody else other than yourself. But I mean, do you think that change, moving away from a structure, which I mean the state has done. I mean, there's been like a sea change. I realize we're talking about a different substance, but they had the opportunity to do it differently this time, and they chose to. Do you think that structure of not having an artificial limit on licenses and therefore like an artificially or inflated price, do you think that kind of structure is something that we should be applying to the new industry?
My own personal opinion?
Yes. I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lawrence.
Do you know how many retail alcohol establishments are in the city limits?
I believe there's 40.
So where did the mayor come up with the number of 12?
Because if you look at the number of alcohol establishments that are supposed to be in the city based on the population, it's 9.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Tacky.
Have you or anybody entertained, like a substitute that would reflect more closely with the way you regulate alcohol establishments within the city code?
I think it's in the works.
Any other questions for Ms. Tharian? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate the briefing. And next I have City of North Pole Representative Mrs. Heading. Welcome.
Hello. I have here Saturday, April 28th. This is United Way Mayors, charity ball. The 3 mayors have all donated something special to the event that will be auctioned off. If you're interested in attending, check out the United Way of Tanana Valley's website, because tickets are going fast. May 1st is the memorial for Trooper Gabe Rich and Scott Johnson at the Trooper Park in North Pole at 11 a.m. This event is where we remember the 2 fallen troopers and add names to the wall there. We ask the community to come out and to show your support to our community's public servants who have given their life in the line of duty. For more information, contact the North Pole Police Department. Parking will be limited, so we ask that you park at the North Pole Worship Center parking lot or at Safeway parking lot. May 2nd is the date for the North Pole Forum. This event will be at the North Pole City Hall. Doors open at 5:30 p.m., and the forum will start promptly at 6 p.m. We will be discussing private property rights and what next is an acceptable level of regulation. The forum was developed by a North Pole High School student, Caleb Freeman. Please come and help engage in thoughtful conversation as we engage as a community. The city has an ordinance coming up at the next council meeting of May 7th to designate the entire city boundaries as a military facility zone. Once the ordinance is approved, we'll be submitting the application to the DMVA for consideration. We are asking for letter or documents of support to be included with the application. If the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly is interested in supporting the city, we eagerly accept your support. We are expecting to submit our application before the 25th of May. Our 4th of July committee has been meeting. Next meeting dates are May 14th and 29th, then June 11th and June 25th. All meetings start at 6 p.m. at the North Pole City Hall. The parade route will be the same as last year, starting at the City Hall and ending at the high school. The festival will be held at the high school. The theme this year is Home of Heroes. Who is your hero? For more information, contact Committee Chair Katie England, 978-2282, or Bryce Ward, 888-4444. Parade entry forms and festival booth applications are available at North Pole City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see if there are any questions. Mr. Lawrence.
Ms. Handy, what time was what day was the park memorial celebration?
Memorial for the troopers, May 1st, 11 a.m.
Yes, Mr. Quist.
Thank you for the briefing. I've got a question about the military facility zone. I'm not familiar with that. Do you mind speaking to it a little bit more?
Well, the mayor gave me this to read. I have really no idea. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Thank you.
Our other mayor may have a little bit more of a briefing for you. Educate all of you.
It's a creation of an area that gets approved by the state of Alaska as a military facility zone. We, the Assembly, are allowed to offer a variety of different kinds of incentives. It doesn't require us to do anything, but we can do different kinds of development tax incentives, et cetera, to encourage placement of appropriate developments close to military bases. So research facilities on military things, commercial properties to help support staff, there's a variety of things. So it's a tool in the toolbox to try to encourage development that's compatible with the military uses nearby and can be used at the community's discretion one way or another.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mrs. Heading? Seeing none, thank you very much for the briefing. Very thorough. And that takes us to our report from our school board representative, Mr. Bartels.
Thank you, President Dodge. If you'll allow me the opportunity to, I made some notes here because there's quite a few announcements to make as we reach the end of the school year. State and local education funding remains at the forefront of the board. As board members, the administration, staff, students, parents continue their lobbying for advocacy. And earlier we brought up the fact that we will have 3 opportunities for public testimony, May 1st, the 8th. The 22nd, we have public testimony at 5:30, and we have a potential, if we don't get our work done, meeting slated for the 23rd as well, and that would be available too. Want to make mention that the board really appreciates the joint meeting that we had with the Assembly Finance Committee last week, and looks forward to continued joint discussions with the Borough and Assembly. Hopefully, as schedules permit, a little bit earlier in the year, but I think it was a healthy, robust discussion and offered transparency, and I think that's something that we can all appreciate and should encourage. The 2018 VP Teachers of Excellence celebration was held Tuesday night to honor this year's VP Teachers of Excellence, who are Benedict Cabusol, forgive me if I mispronounce, from West Valley, Stacy Foshi, Barnett Magnet, Bruce Hansen, North Pole High, Julie McHenry, North Pole Elementary, Ashley Savage, North Pole High, Kelly Thrun, Joy Elementary. I also want to add congratulations to Bruce Hansen from North Pole High School, who was selected as the 2018 Teacher of the Year. He's also retiring. We're saddened by that. But schools are gearing up for the end of the school year. There are many end-of-the-year activities taking place throughout the district. Additional information on specific activities can be found on additional school websites or by calling your student's school. Also want to make mention of public safety announcement. A lot of kids are taking bikes to school this time of year, so be on the lookout. The school board will be hosting its annual retirement reception in recognition of the 2017-18 district retirees on May 1st. That starts at 6:15 in the boardroom, and this year we are recognizing 53 employees who have announced their intent to retire, which is about average for this time of year. And lastly, in gearing up for next year, we have our kindergarten roundup that is scheduled for next Tuesday and Wednesday, May 1st and 2nd at area schools, and more information is available by visiting district website. So with that, I'll take any questions and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if there are questions for you. Mr. Quest.
Thank you. Thanks for the briefing. So I'm asking this question in the context of the email and text message that was sent from the borough, presumably to the Power School users, or I'm not sure what mailing list was getting this, but so I mean there was a message that went out today indicating that we were going to be discussing a resolution tonight, and I think you're aware of the context, so I'll skip it. I guess my question is, does the Board of Education have a policy on how these communications are to be used, and what they're to be used for, what they're not to be used for, and how do the messages that went out today fit into such a policy?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Quist, and I think if I can answer it, we continue to try to, first off, we're advocates for the educational system. So with that being said, we continue to try to make public announcements as we can to make sure that the public is not only aware, but also if there's advocacy that can be taking place to support the local school district. Is it implied that it was a misuse of public announcement?
Well, maybe there's an implication, but if I can reply to that, I'm genuinely interested on what the board's policy is on the use of these kinds of communications, and also, regardless of implication, and we can even leave that aside, I'm interested where you, or maybe we get this from the board at some other point, feel that the communication that went out today, how does that fit into that policy?
Okay, I appreciate the question, and how we continually are examined is through how we communicate to our stakeholders, and that can be diced in many different ways. And of course, Monday morning quarterbacks always have the best advantage. So to say nothing, we can be judged accordingly. To say something that is going to advocate for school interest, we're always going to side on that side of the coin. And so I believe that this is something that our stakeholders want to know. And so I feel very strongly that it was a good use of communication.
One more on the same vein here. In the interest of informing stakeholders, and the school district is an educational organization, and providing accurate information should be just kind of top of the list. Do you feel that the message that went out today, given I'd like to think that the Board of Education and the school district administration are paying close attention to this budget process, given where we are in this budget process, do you feel that email painted an accurate picture of where we are and where we're likely to go?
I can assure you that the school board and school district is very in tune with the budget process as we stand right now, and I'm not sure exactly the question at hand, but as far as is it accurate information, I believe it was presented in a format that we're citing on the side of caution. My personal opinion, I appreciate Mr. Sessemann and Mr. Cooper's resolution here, but to get public testimony and public support behind it, we're going to communicate that to our stakeholders.
So, can I try that one more time? Because I really don't feel you answered the question, but I can save it for comments at the end.
Fire away.
But we're not in debate.
I'm not trying to debate,
I'm explaining to Mr. Bartels. So, you want to try the question?
I'll just try to be as brief as I can. So, the message that went out today, do you feel that it painted a full, accurate, complete picture of where we are in the budget process and where we're likely to go? Full is too much. Do you feel that it painted an accurate picture and where we're likely to go?
I think it was an accurate comment as it was presented, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for our school board representative? Seeing none, thank you. And it's a further conversation that's useful to all of us to understand.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, let us see. That takes us to special orders, public hearing. And first up, we have a liquor license, new beverage dispensary, a duplicate license, number 5629. It's on page 42 of your packet. It's Midnight Mine LLC, doing business as Midnight Mine, 308 Wendell Avenue, Fairbanks. And Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
We do. Go to Mr. Williams for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Dodge, the Borough Administration has reviewed the liquor license beverage dispensary application for Midnight Mine LLC, DBA Midnight Mine. The property is zoned consistent with its intended use, and Borough Administration recommends no protest.
Thank you. So we're going to go to public hearing on the Midnight Mine LLC beverage dispensary. I have no one signed up. Does anyone wish to speak on the Midnight Mine liquor license new beverage dispensary? Seeing no one coming forward, I'm going to close public hearing.
Move to file no protest.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Tacky. So, any discussion or debate? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Tacky?
Yes.
Mr. Lajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
8-0.
Thank you. So that takes us to marijuana license, new retail store, license 12956, and I see Mr. Tacky has his hand raised.
Of course, it's I own a marijuana product manufacturing facility, and for the next two licensees, they are either potential customers or vendors for my establishment.
Okay.
So I think
Thank you very much. You're excused. And Mr. Quist.
Thank you. My in-laws are licensed cultivators, and therefore could be potential vendors or customers, and I think I have a conflict.
Thank you. And we agree, and you're excused. And now we are 6. So that takes us to a staff report. Let me see. I didn't even get to much of anything here, so I'll read. So we have a marijuana license, new retail store, license 12956. It's on page 54 of our packet. It is called the Grass Station LLC, doing business as Grass Station 49. It's at 665 Rainbow Drive, Fairbanks, 99712. Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
We do. Back to Mr. Williams for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Dodge, the Borough Administration has reviewed the new marijuana license application for a retail store for the Grass Station LLC, DBA Grass Station 49. The property is zoned consistently with its intended use, and Borough Administration recommends no protest.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to public hearing, and I have 5 people signed up. What I'll do is go through those 5 people, and then if there's someone else that wishes to speak on this, we'll invite you to take the empty seat. So I'm starting off with Reinhard Thielmann, perhaps, followed by Lynn Coe, my apologies. Oh, no, thank you. So, Mr. Thielmann, please give us your name, spell your last name, and tell us your neighborhood, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yes, Richard Thielmann, Theilmann. Welcome, Assembly members. I reside at 658 Fairbanks Street. I don't have a problem. It's okay.
Thank you.
I just want to comment. I have no problem with the retail store. I do feel that these things should be regulated like alcohol. I would like to see the troopers or our law enforcement certainly look out for stone drivers as they look out for drunk drivers. That's my comment about the retail store.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if there are any comments or questions for you before you leave. I don't see any. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming down and giving us your comments. So in the empty seat, I have Teresa Aaron, perhaps? Oh, Aaron. Teresa, please come up. And if the applicant is in the room when I call you, let me know and you'll get 10 minutes. So, Ms. Coe, please give us your name, spell your last name, give us your neighborhood.
My name is Lynn Stanley Coe. I'm not a public speaker, so I'll be reading to you this evening. Last name Coe, C-O-E. I reside at 494 Ruth Estates Road. For the record, Rainbow Drive and Ruth Estates Road are one and the same road. The name change occurs when the pavement ends and the dirt begins. I voted for the legalization of marijuana in our town twice. The Evans family has every right to sell cannabis. As I stated in my letter to Mayors Castle, Matherly, and Ward, dated May 17, 2017, there are 2 reasons for my objecting to this retail shop being allowed to open. Firstly, Grass Station 49 is hoping to begin selling marijuana in an Echo trailer at the beginning of Rainbow Drive, which is the entrance to my neighborhood, which is Silver Birch Estates. It is also located directly across the street from a trailer court with over 60 families living there. The school bus stop for this trailer court is located across the street from Grass Station 49. As you travel up Rainbow Drive, you encounter a lovely, peaceful neighborhood loaded with horseback riders, joggers, walkers, bicyclists, skateboarders, hordes of children that use Rainbow Drive as their outdoor activity outlet. Opening a marijuana retail shop in any neighborhood in our borough is a terrible idea. I venture to say that if any one of the members of this council sitting before me would be feeling angst if this shop were to open up in your neighborhood as well. If you allow this shop to open in this location, you will be setting an unwanted precedence. Remember the strip club that was approved by the borough to open up in a neighborhood? You changed the zoning regulations after the fact, which did nothing to help that neighborhood. You can't undo what has already been established. Secondly, Grass Station 49 is located on a very congested, hazardous, and dangerous intersection. The intersection of Chena Hot Springs Road and Rainbow Drive has one of the highest accident percentages in the borough per our local DOT office. The additional traffic, which would be merging and stopping on a very short stretch of road to even turn onto Rainbow, would only exacerbate a bad situation. It would become an even bigger safety hazard for the Chena Hot Springs Road commuting public, the residents of the trailer park, and the residents of Silver Birch Estates. There are many other appropriate locations to open up a marijuana retail shop. The beginning of any neighborhood is not that appropriate spot. You can't undo what has already been done. I ask that you reconsider allowing a shop to be allowed to do business in this or any neighborhood on a very dangerous stretch of road. Lastly, I wish the Evans family much success with their other 2 retail marijuana shops, which are located in appropriate areas. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Let us see if there's some questions. I see Mr. Lawrence.
Ms. Cole,
Yes.
how far is this proposed Echo unit from Rainbow Trailer Court? From the closest edge of Rainbow Trailer Court?
I have not measured it. If the borough is allowing it to open, it must meet the 750 feet requirement that is now has been established. But so, Mr. Lawrence, I believe that it probably meets the borough zoning criteria.
And how far is the turnoff once you turn off of Chena Hot Springs Road north on Rainbow, Rainbow Drive? How far will that vehicle go before it turns into the marijuana establishment?
25 feet. I mean, it's right there on the corner, right? Basically on the corner. The entrance to their shop.
But they would enter from Rainbow, not from Chena Hot Springs.
Correct.
All right. Thanks.
Any other questions of Ms. Coe? Yes, Ms. Major.
What is, I'm familiar with the area, but I haven't been out there in a long time. That property, what is it being used for now? Do you know?
What property?
The area where the proposed establishment.
Yes.
Shop?
Yeah. Well, it's being prepped for the shop to open.
Sure.
They purchased the property, and rightly so. It was zoned commercial. We didn't catch that in time.
Okay. Any other questions from Ms. Coe? Seeing none, thank you. We appreciate you coming down. Gary Evans is up next. Miss Aaron, is that correct?
Oh, I'll take it.
Aaron,
Aaron's-
thank you. Ms. Aaron.
It's like the rent-a-furniture store. My name is Teresa Ahrens, Ahrens. I live at 793 Quasar. And I think Lynn got it in my brain when I was writing this up because it's almost exactly the same thing. But here's my take on the whole thing, okay? I'm here to express my deep concern regarding the location of this proposed store. Like Lynn, you are looking at an interchange that is one of the highest trafficked parts in the North Star Borough. Do you know, according to DOT, it's 8,000 to 9,000 cars a day come through there, and that was of their latest report, I believe the 1st of January 2016. The establishment wants to locate at right close to the end of Rainbow as it comes up to Chena Hot Springs Road. Rainbow itself is the main corridor that hundreds of homes feed into from, and Lynn is correct. You got Ruth Estates, you got Highlander, you got chunks of Old Steel Creek, where the fire station is. A lot of those people and a lot of those subdivisions feed into Rainbow Drive. Rainbow Drive is what we call a Tier 2 borough road. Not borough, excuse me. Sorry. Sometimes I wish the borough would take care of that road. It's a DOT Tier 2 road. It's narrow. There are no sides. There's no extra room on this road. There's no turnouts. There's nothing. All right? I believe a question was asked, how far, I think it's was it from the driveway to the road? I'm sorry. Okay. It is approximately, picture this in your mind, a car is 17 feet long. The driveway from the start of Chena Hot Springs and Rainbow Drive is 4 car lengths back. I've lived in this area for 34 years. There are some mornings, and actually there's some during the day, there were 4 or 5 or 6 car lengths waiting to get on Chena Hot Springs Road. All right? So now, what's happening? DOT, we all know they've recognized this as a hot spot. They recognize that this area is stressed on traffic. They've noted in the past 3 years we've had a significant increase in accidents and accordingly injuries on this intersection. So, this is my concern. If we're going to open up this proposed retail store, that is going to bring in a higher volume of traffic than what is currently there. If Chena Hot Springs is not able to keep up with its current traffic flow according to DOT, Rainbow is not going to keep up with the traffic control according to DOT. That road right now is under stress. Since the time we moved in there in 81, so I may be off on that 34 years, huh? I'm aging myself now. Since we moved in since 81, traffic has increased 10 times on that road. My concern is that it's going to be a safety issue. My concern is right now that road cannot handle any more additional traffic. And I'm afraid for people living on that road, including myself and everybody else, and people coming down from Chena Hot Springs. Trust me, ask me a question how hard it is to get to Rainbow Drive from Chena Hot Springs. For the past 34 years, I've been driving that way.
Let's see if there's some questions for you. Then Mr. Lejeski has a question for you.
Yeah, on the issue of traffic, I know DOT had some sort of plans to rebuild around that overpass.
Yes.
Is that, I actually don't know the status of that. What
Well,
is
they're going to
going
put
on
in
there?
roundabouts, one on each side. But they haven't given us the final details of that. So it's in constant flux. But as it pertains to Rainbow Drive, because this is the road in which me and my hundreds of fellow people live on, Rainbow is not a great road. It's paved. and it's got lines on it, but it's falling apart, and there's not a lot of space between it and Chino Hot Springs. So even if a roundabout goes through, and it doesn't, it doesn't encroach on Rainbow Drive, you're still going to have a lot of traffic congestion on Rainbow Drive. We're not going to eliminate that, see? So I'm just worried about the increase and the dangers it poses to an already bad situation.
Okay. That answer your question, Mr. Wadowski?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Ahrens? Ahrens, I'll get that right yet.
You got it.
Yes, Mr. Cooper has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Question, sure. So that parcel that they're proposing to put the retail establishment on,
yeah,
is its own commercial.
Yes.
Was there a business there that operated before?
No.
It's just.
No, I'll tell you. Let me give you some history.
Since you've been there for a while,
I'll give you some history of that, Lou.
Sure.
Behind it was an EMT station.
Okay.
Because at the time, the fire stations and the EMTs were separate. And they used to pass the boot around. And all down the road they'd go, and people would give them money to keep the EMT station. So that would be the only commercial thing there. And then that was sold to a private individual who turned it into a really cool little house. He's been working really hard on it. Now, I think somebody asked Lynn about how far away it was away from the trailer court to the road. Well, it's only like, it's 70 feet from their building to Rainbow. So Rainbow is only so many feet wide, right? I mean, and then you got a 20 feet easement, and then that's where the trailer court is. So I don't understand about the 700,000 feet thing. I don't quite understand that because you're not that far away. I mean, you probably I go by car lengths. I'm a driving safety instructor, so we go by car lengths in my business. She's right, though. You're not that far from the trailer court at all. So I'm trying to figure out where the 700 feet comes in at. I don't know if they're going by property lines or actual houses. Actual trailers. I don't know how that works. But yeah, I don't know about that one.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Major, did you have a question? Do we have anybody to talk to distances? Thank you, Ms. Ahrens.
Thank you very much.
So next I have Frank Turney to take the empty seat. Mr. Evans, are you the applicant?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, then you have 10 minutes. You probably don't have to be quite that close to the mic. A little bit. There you go. Good. So give us your name and spell your last name and...
Gary Evans, E-V-A-N-S, 125 Kenneth Street. I'm just here to mainly answer any questions you guys have. We have an active retail store right now, of course, which we've had no problems with. As far as crime goes, we get some drunks that are just happening on Cushman Street. That's typical. But other than that, we haven't had any issues. The lot we're looking at now on Rainbow Drive is zoned general commercial. I know they have some concerns back here behind us. The only thing I think to that is they zone that general commercial, and they kept it general commercial in hopes to sell it to retail or gas station or anything in the future, in which case would have increased traffic through there, regardless of what you put there. And then as far as the trailer court goes, to my knowledge, because it is zoned general commercial, it doesn't matter how many feet away it is from a general commercial lot. The only sensitive use buffers we have are schools, churches, and things along that sort with zoned general commercial.
You can move that away a little further. There you go. Thank you. Let's see if there are questions for you. I presume that was what you have to say at this point.
Yeah,
Okay, Ms. Major has a question for you.
I also have a couple of questions depending on what others might have. What are your proposed hours of operation?
So the proposed hours of operation will mirror the operation we have now, which is 9 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week.
And what do you propose in terms of, or what do you have proposed in terms of signage outside of or around the property?
So signage, our signage has to be attached to the building via state law. We can have up to 3 signs, and they can't exceed 4,800 square inches. We plan to have all 3 of those, most likely one facing Rainbow Drive, one facing Chino Hot Springs, and then one kind of upward facing towards the highway.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay. Any other questions? Just Mr. Lawrence.
Mr. Evans, you have how many other cannabis retail stores operating now?
Operational now, we have one.
And that's on South Cushman?
Yeah, more or less. Cushman Airport, the intersection there.
Okay. And how long has that store been open?
Since May 25th of last year.
You mean just an average, how many customers do you have a day?
That one, probably about 300, 350. Sometimes more. Just depends.
Okay, that's all for now.
Ms. Major.
So I'll just carry on that thought about how many patrons do you anticipate would be frequenting this establishment?
With that one, with the demographic we have out there, we're estimating that one will be about half.
Any other questions for Mr. Evans? Seeing none, thank you. We appreciate you coming down. So with that, I have an empty seat. If anyone else wishes to speak on marijuana license, new retail store, Grass Station, LLC. Mr. Turney.
Yeah, 329 6th Avenue. When it comes to safety, I think everybody's concerned. No matter what neighborhood you come in, when it comes to cannabis, citizens going to come out unopposed of it. As far as the trailer court, I'd have to get a measurement, but I believe it's about 1,000 feet from what she was talking about, more than 700 feet from that area. As far as the flow of traffic, I don't think you're going to see an increase of flow of traffic. You're going to be catering to those people that live out there on the Chino Hot Springs Road that want edibles for a lot of different reasons and smoking cannabis. I would like to share something. I purchased my cannabis at Grass Station 49. That's where I go because I live right downtown. When it comes to professionalism, all those staff is really professional, excellent. The only thing that irritates me at 71 years old is having to show my ID. That irritates me, but they're very prompt about doing it because I've seen people come in there who were denied access to getting anything because they didn't show their ID, and I think that's part of the regulation. You know, I've met a lot of people in there with wheelchairs, the handicapped people with walkers, senior citizens that come in there. You know why they're coming in there? So they can sleep at night, so they can ease their pain. And mostly sleep at night, I don't know, you know, when you're smoking, eating edibles and cannabis, you don't get no hangover. But if you have to take Valium, I don't know, check it out. Valium's the number one leading killer today of people ODing. Mostly 58% of the seniors now take antidepressants, you know, like Valium and many things. I think a lot of them would rather smoke some cannabis or to relieve their pain or eat edibles. I'm an edible eater myself, and I still got my faculties. You can question me about anything about cannabis or hemp or anything, and I can come off with it. I got a pretty good memory, and I just had some edibles before I came here, and I feel pretty relaxed. Anyway, thank you. And I do support the retail shop out there. I call it the Rainbow Trailer Court. And believe me, I think there's some senior citizens out there who would like to have some edibles because they are in a lot of pain. I visited that trailer court many times out there. So I think that's a proper place. I don't know if you got a report on DOT, but I'd like to see if there isn't any regarding the traffic flow out there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Let's see if there are questions before you run off.
Oh, I doubt it.
Well, we surprise you sometimes. Thank you. So I don't have anyone else. I don't have anyone else signed up. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify or speak on Press Station 49? On Rainbow Drive? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment.
Move to file no protest.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Lejeski. And Mr. Lawrence, you had your hand up, is that correct?
Okay.
And then
Ms.
Mr. Gray?
Nelson, I got a question for the administration regarding.
Ms. Nelson, could you join us? Thank you.
Ms. Nelson, could you remind us what is the buffer distance between a cannabis retail store and a residential neighborhood?
A residential zone is 100 feet.
100 feet. And what is Rainbow Trailer Court zoned as?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I believe it's in our in your packet, which I don't have in front of me. We do that as part of our sign-off.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay, thank you. RA5, which we do consider a residential zone.
Okay, and the buffer is just is 100 feet, and I presume then that the distance between this proposed site, retail site, and the trailer court is more than 100 feet.
Yes, again, I don't have the maps that are in your packet.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gray.
Well, I mean, this might be more of a question for DOT since they're the ones making plans in that area, but I don't know if there's an option for the applicant to maybe get access at some point off of Chena Hot Springs Road or off that interchange, but that would be interesting to know. I don't know if anyone knows.
It doesn't, we can't, yeah, you could do this. So, Ms. Nelson, do you know anything about DOT access?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion, debate? Yes, Ms.
I guess one question and then a point of discussion. So I do see where in our packets, you know, the 760 feet to the daycare, but I guess I don't see that same distance as Mr. Lawrence has suggested to the trailer court. I think you're looking at that now.
Are you asking Ms. Nelson or are you asking?
Yes, no, I'm sorry. I was asking the administration, yes.
Quick clarification, sorry. Trailer court is.
For the listening public, we are all wrestling paper and trying to find a couple of answers.
So it appears that the trailer court surrounds the daycare or is on that same property as the daycare. If that's not correct, then the distance would be less than 760 feet.
Do you have a page number you can draw our attention to?
Oh, I'm
or
on
anything?
page 57. So if you look at pages 56 and 57, that shows the zoning and then the sensitive uses with the map showing the distances.
Okay. Any Ms. Major?
Just for sake of discussion, the one thing that does concern me is the testimony on the traffic and the potential for increase of traffic. That would just be my one kind of concern with this location. Having driven out there enough times to just know that it is kind of it can be a tough road with the number of transitions, the short, coming off of the ramp and the quick turns. So I do definitely appreciate the residents' concerns because I do think that they're legitimate with the existing traffic problems in the area.
Ms. Nelson, did they consider that, and did the Planning Commission consider traffic?
This isn't the general commercial zone, so a retail store is an outright use with the zoning permit, and we are not, as a zoning permit, we're not allowed to use that as we can't condition it or even consider it. DOT could require some sort of driveway permit or other review as part of their permit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So DOT is looking at this area. They have been investigating a variety of different traffic calming solutions for it. It has risen to the point of having enough accidents to qualify for federal safety dollars and almost a requirement that DOT do something with it. They're struggling. I don't believe they have come to a final plan for it, in that the community is pushing back against some of their traffic calming ideas, and so they're still working through that. And so I guess from our perspective is, yes, traffic currently is an issue there. DOT is trying to fix it, and that isn't really our job per se. That's DOT's job, and hopefully they'll find an adequate solution for all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper.
Thanks, and I'll just reiterate this for those in the audience and those listening. This is another example of the zoning problem that we have around the community. We're often not running this with lots that are zoned GU, but here we have a lot that's zoned commercial. I know exactly where it is on the way up there, and folks who view it as part of a residential area. So I encourage folks to think about their zoning. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world to think about, but in Fairbanks in particular, it makes a big difference on issues like this, because in a case like this where it's zoned commercial and it meets all the requirements, I think at least I feel compelled that we have to, we don't have a reason to protest it at least. So just a food for thought for those out there. Think about your zoning.
Okay, yes, Mr. Ledesky.
I'll acknowledge, of course, that the traffic concerns are legitimate and real. I have them too. I also wonder if this wasn't potentially going to be used for a marijuana shop, if a fast food restaurant or gas station or something else that was coming in that could maybe generate even more traffic were to come in, if we'd be having the same discussion about the potential traffic issue.
Mr. Lawrence.
One point that was made by Mr. Turney and maybe by the applicant, and I think that has merit, is there's enough retail cannabis stores in this community that the people who are going to utilize this store are people who are going to be out there anyway. It's not like they're going to leave town or come around Farmers Loop. I don't see that. So, I think it could increase traffic some, but I don't think it's going to increase it that much. I acknowledge there's going to be traffic turning onto Rainbow that wouldn't normally, but the point is it's traffic that probably lives out on Chino Hot Springs Road anyway, or they wouldn't be going to that store.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just a quick response to Mr. Ledesky's comment. The Chief of Staff reminded me we wouldn't be having this discussion if it was a restaurant creating even more traffic, because it qualifies on this property and it would just go in. It wouldn't even come to the assembly. It's permitted here. So, yeah, good point.
Any other discussion or debate of staff? Seeing none, Clerk, it looks like we're ready to vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ledesky.
Yes.
Major? No. Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
5-1.
It's adopted 5, approved 5-1. On the protest, approved 5-1. Okay. And that takes us to marijuana license new standard cultivation facility, license 14136, which is Denali Gold LLC. Doing business as Denali Gold LLC, 1092 Dolphin Way. Mayor, do you have a staff report?
We do. Back to Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Dodge. Borough Administration has reviewed the new marijuana license application permit for Denali Gold LLC, DBA Denali Gold LLC. The property is zoned consistently with its intended use, and Borough Administration recommends no protest.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention it's on page 156 of your packet. So I have I'm going to open public hearing on marijuana license, new standard cultivation facility, Denali Gold LLC. I have one person signed up, Richard Thielman. Mr. Thielman, if anyone else wishes to testify on Denali Gold, please take the empty seat. Mr. Thielman, please give us your name, spell your last name, and give us your neighborhood. You'll have 3 minutes.
Richard Thielman, Theilmann, residing at 658 Fairbanks Street. Once again, members of the Assembly. Just want to state for the record, I do not have any problem with Denali Gold. Do not even know who they are. However, with regards to cultivation facilities, in the course of my job this past winter, driving around Van Horn, the atmospheric conditions can be unbearable. I don't know where exactly this neighborhood is, but I think some type of atmospheric mitigation needs to be considered with any additional facilities. And we have a lot of grow facilities, and quite frankly, they stink. And our air quality gets very difficult in the wintertime. So I don't know if they were cooking or smoking or whatever they were doing, but it was pretty intense this past winter down at the Van Horn region. This may not be the forum for this, nor am I against their application, but I think we need to consider how they vent their atmosphere. If this is the facility that's in that airport hangar, there are residential people living right around. I know there are people living in the Van Horn area. It's not strictly just commercial. And it was pretty tough. There was a couple of times I felt like I was stoned, or thought I was going to get stoned just driving around down there in the course of my job. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Thielman. Let's see if there are questions for you. Seeing none, we appreciate you coming down. Does anyone else wish to speak on the Denali Gold? Mr. Attorney, please come join us. That's fine. And anyone else that hasn't signed up, if there's someone else, we have an empty seat next to Mr. Attorney.
Yeah, Frank Turney, 329 6th Avenue. I like the name Denali Gold, but he mentions he's worried about the air. There's no health effects whatsoever, or anybody going to get a psychoactive high when that stuff goes into the air and dissipates. The science don't show that, but the science does show that if somebody out barbecued meat and that goes up in the air, it can cause cancer. But as far as that goes, on the cannabis stuff, he's talking about doing some type of a measurement. Is that what he said, on the air quality? And see if the cannabis had any effect whatsoever? I would like to see that study myself.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if there are any questions for you, Mr. Attorney. Seeing none, thank you. We appreciate you coming down. Mr. Evans, please give us your name and spell your last name and tell us your name.
Gary Evans, EVANS, 125 Kenneth Street. I just want to get up. I've never met these people before, but from an industry standpoint, as far as smell mitigation goes in these neighborhoods, I think as an industry, we try our hardest to mitigate the smells and be good neighbors. So regardless, like I said, I've never met these people. I hope that they run a clean operation, but they at least earn a chance to do so. If smell becomes an issue, that is an issue for the state to handle. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Let's see if there are questions for you. Yes, Mr. Lawrence has a question for you.
Mr. Evans, you own one store now, and you're wanting to open two more. You don't have any cultivation businesses, do you?
No, sir.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak on Denali Gold's license? Well, hold on a minute, Mr. Attorney. If no one else wants to speak, you can have one more minute.
I collected signatures on that initiative.
Wait a minute, Frank Turney.
Okay, Frank Turney, 329 6th Avenue. I write next to the mortuary. I don't have very far to go. Anyway, I collected signatures on that. I looked at that over and over, and David Prue's really questioned that too. There was nothing on that initiative that said anything about smell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney. Any questions for Mr. Attorney? Seeing none? Okay. Anyone else coming forward for Denali Gold license? Seeing none?
Move to file no protest.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Gray, to file no protest, seconded by Mr. Lawrence. Discussion, debate, questions of staff? It's very quiet up here. I think we're ready to vote, Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
6-0.
It's adopted 6-0. And we have this very controversial ordinance coming up, ordinance number 2018-11. So I think we'll cruise through it rather than take a break. It's an ordinance amending Fairbanks North Star Borough Code 3.24.050A regarding Assembly Road Service Area Committee. The sponsors are Assembly members Roberts, Gray, and Cooper. It's on page 245 of your packet. Mr. Gray or Mr. Cooper, do you have a staff report?
I can give it a shot here. This is pretty simple, actually. So currently the Road Service Area Committee has 3 members of the Assembly on it, and due to kind of diminishing grant funds and projects kind of ramping down on this, we were proposing to switch that to 2 members of the Assembly, so a chair and an additional Assembly member. That's it.
Mr. Cooper, anything to add?
I agree with Mr. Gray.
Thank you. I should apologize to the listening public for making a joke there when you don't know that it was a joke, because it's a very simple ordinance. So with that, I'm going to open public hearing on ordinance 2018-11. I have no one signed up. I have no one coming forward, so I'm going to close public hearing.
Second.
So it was moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Gray.
No, Mr. Cooper. It was Mr. Cooper.
That's true. It was moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Cooper. Assembly debate discussion. Yes, Mr.
I'll just add,
Mr. Gray.
as Mr. Roberts pointed out, since the sponsors of the ordinance are the ones that are on the RSEC, we haven't decided which one of us is going to lose the honor. Are you volunteering that?
I believe I'm the alternate, so I de facto get kicked off. Okay.
I think that the effective date is November, as I recall.
Right.
Yeah.
So no one
Good try,
gets
though.
to go off.
Mr. Lawrence, was that your point, or do you have something more to say?
One of my points was that, yeah, all 3 of you get to stay on for the duration, but of your term, of this term. But I guess I'm going to take a little credit. I've been trying, I've suggested this a couple of years ago to Mr. Roberts, and it makes a lot of sense. I was on the RSAC committee my first year, and there was some merit at that point to have 3 Assembly people, because there was a lot of contention and a lot of stress in the neighborhood, in the community, or in the borough regarding the administration of road service areas. But that's pretty much been smoothed out, and there's just not much money coming from Juneau, so there's not that much for the RSAC to do. So that's why I think this is this ordinance is called for, and I think it probably should have been done a couple of years ago.
Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tackey?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none, it's adopted 8-0. And we're going to go to ordinance number 2017-20-1Y, an ordinance amending the FY 2017-18 budget by appropriating $4,605 in federal pass-through grant funding to the special revenue fund for the attendance and travel of 1 Fairbanks North Star Borough employee and 1 Historic Preservation Commissioner to the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Forum in Des Moines, Iowa. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. It's on page 247. Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
We do. We'll go to our Community Planning Director, Christine Nelson.
Thank you. As stated, this is an estimated $4,605 grant for attendance and travel for 1 commissioner, historic preservation commissioner, and the long range planner for a 5-day conference in Des Moines, Iowa. This conference is held every 2 years. This is a 60% grant with 40% match by the hours of the historic preservation commissioner and the staff member. Attendance in the past has been very valuable to the department. This year there are several themes that play directly into ongoing projects, including the downtown plan, the Salter Badger Historic Building Inventory, and the Historic Preservation Plan update. Those themes include downtown revitalization, Main Street projects, outreach to the community, building community support, and accessing federal and nonprofit resources. And it also gives an opportunity for the commissioner and the staff member to network with other communities and find out what they're doing and better ways to perform our work. And that concludes my staff report.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to open public hearing on ordinance 2017-20-1I, which is appropriating $4,605 in federal pass-through grant funding for the historic preservation commissioner. I don't have anyone signed up. I don't see anyone coming forward, so I'm going to close public hearing. Look for a motion.
Move to adopt. Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Cooper and seconded by Mr. Tacky. Discussion, debate, questions of staff. Seeing none, clerk, I think we're ready to call the roll.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Quist.
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski.
Yes.
Mr. Tacky.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Ms. Dodge.
Yes, would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
Girl.
For the listening public and those in the room with us, while we appear to be racing through this stuff, it's because we had a work session a week ago, and so we've been briefed on most of this and had time to read it and think about it. So that takes us to ordinance 2017-20-1Z, and that is an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget by appropriating $20,000 in state grant funding to the special revenue and or capital projects funds for equipment purchases, maintenance, and training for the Fairbanks North Starborough Hazardous Materials Response Team in support of maintaining and expanding oil and hazardous substance spill response capabilities throughout Alaska. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. It's on page 254. Mayor, do you have a staff report?
We do. From Emergency Operations, we have Mr. Brad Paulson here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair, this ordinance appropriates $20,000 funded through the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation through a state legislative capital appropriation to support our hazmat team here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Most of this money will be used to purchase sensors, calibration gas, immersion suits, and repair parts and other needed necessities for our hazmat team. Most of it going towards our very technical sweeping devices as multi-rays, area rays, and other types of equipment that need to be maintained to respond to chemical and biological and petroleum type emergencies. And that'll conclude my report.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to open public hearing on ordinance 2017-20-1Z, which is appropriating $20,000 in state grant funding in support of maintaining hazmat materials response team. I don't have anyone signed up. I don't see anybody coming forward, so I'm going to close public hearing. Look for a
Move to
motion.
adopt. Second.
Moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Gray. Discussion, debate. Seeing none, clerk, I think we're ready to vote.
Yeah, Mr. Tacky.
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Quist.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
And Ms. Dodge.
Yes, would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none, it's adopted 8-0. That takes us to ordinance 2017-20-2A, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget by appropriating $30,460 from Vehicle and Equipment Fleet Fund, unrestricted net position for equipment lease payments, and appropriating $63,050 from non-area-wide fund balance for a contribution to the Vehicle Equipment Fleet Fund unrestricted net position to cover vehicle replacement charges on an ambulance not included in the budgets for fiscal year 2015, fiscal year 16, fiscal year 2016-17, and fiscal year 2017-18. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. It's on page 260. Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
We do. We'll go to our Transportation Director, Mr. Glenn Miller.
Thank you and good evening. So early this fiscal year, we recognized that the VEF division budget line items for lease payments appeared to be short. And upon further review, we recognized that there were a couple of areas in which there were deficiencies. The first area was that there were insufficient monies appropriated to the VEF division budget to make our lease payments in the amount of $30,460. And then also, when we were looking through the VEF spreadsheets for the ambulances, we noticed that there were one ambulance that there was insufficient contributions made towards the VEF fund from the non-area-wide fund balance. So the $63,050 does just that. It takes that money from the non-area-wide fund balance and appropriates it to the VEF fund to make that whole. And that concludes my staff report.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to open public hearing on ordinance 2017-20-2A, which is appropriating $30,460 from the VEF fund and $63,050 from the non-area-wide fund to cover vehicle replacement charges on an ambulance. I have no one signed up. I see no one coming forward. I'm going to close public hearing. Look for motion.
Move to adopt. Second.
So moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Gray. Any discussion, debate? Seeing none, clerk, we're ready to roll.
Mr. Tacky.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
Yes.
Mr. Quist.
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Ms. Dodge.
Yes, would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none,
8-0.
it's adopted 8-0. And that's going to take us to ordinance 2017-20-2B, an ordinance amending the FY 2017-18 budget by reappropriating $87,083 from the calendar year 2009 Land Development and Sale Program to the Land Survey Sampling and Cleanup Projects in the Capital Projects Fund and or Multi-Year General Subfund. The sponsor is Mayor Castle, and it's on page 265. Mayor Castle, do you have a staff report?
We do. From our Land Management Department, we have Shelley Rowden here for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Land Management is before you tonight to ask for your support of Ordinance 2017-20-2B. The establishment of this capital project fund or multi-year subfund through reappropriation of dormant funds would allow Land Management to quickly react to certain issues affecting borough land. Minor surveying, sampling, monitoring, cleanup could be addressed with this fund, while any major cleanups or long-term issues would come before this Assembly for funding and/or approval. These funds would allow Land Management to restore the marketability and usability of current, past, or future borough sale properties. Last week, Ms. Dolan mentioned a property with an open DEC case, and Mr. Tackey asked for an estimate of the cost of that project. Initial estimates for winter soil sampling from our term contractor were around $50,000. However, we are waiting on a revised estimate that we expect to be lower given the rates for summer fieldwork versus winter. With the implementation of this ordinance, we will be able to move on to other suspected trespass and encroachment cases. Those will be triaged after initial field inspections by Land Management staff in May and June. Most of those cases appear to be things such as abandoned vehicles and similar property, but they always have the potential for increasing in scope and cost. Having this contingency fund for smaller cleanups will allow us to be responsive to problems as they arise. We ask that you adopt this ordinance by reappropriating expired development incentive monies to this measure that will assist in the responsible management and cleanup of borough land. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open public hearing on Ordinance 2017-20-2B, which is reappropriating $87,083 from 2009 land development to land survey, sampling, and cleanup. I have no one signed up. I see no one coming forward, so I'm going to close public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Lawrence, seconded by Mr. Cooper. Discussion debate. Mr. Lawrence.
You know, as the staff report indicated, this $87,000 isn't going to go very far at all if we're talking about cleaning up land. But as far as removing vehicles, you know, that's going to make it's going to help. I mean, that can make a big difference. We're going to need to appropriate more money in the future, I think, to deal with this, with hazardous materials and borough land. But this is a good start, and I would urge passage.
Any other discussion or debate? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Mr. Lojewski?
Yes.
Mr. Tackey?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
8-0.
It's 8-0. I'm going to suggest that we take a break for 7 minutes. 5 minutes? You want 5 minutes? Okay, 5-minute break. We'll be back and we'll pick up Resolution 2017-18. Okay, we're back on the record. 5 minutes. You guys did great. 5-minute break. And we are on consideration of calendar unfinished business, Resolution 2018-17. It is a resolution specifying the minimum amount of money to be made available from local sources to the Fairbanks-North Borough School District for school purposes during fiscal year 2018-19. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. It's on page 270. There's a proposed substitute in our yellow folders, and there's additional information in our yellow folders. And we, on April 16th, 2018, we moved the resolution. The resolution was moved, and then it was postponed. So we are at assembly debate and questions of staff. Mr. Cooper.
I was going to, do you want me to give the staff report, or do you want me to move?
Move the substitute, and then I'll ask you for it to
Okay,
speak to it.
I'll move the substitute.
Second.
So the proposed substitute has been moved by Mr. Cooper and seconded by Mr. Quist. Mr. Cooper, would you like to speak to your proposed substitute?
Sure. And so I kind of written this in two parts. One is a staff report, and one is, what my comments are during the debate and discussion. So I'll merge them into one. So this substitute came about as I was thinking about this issue quite a bit over the weekend, and there are two aspects to it. One, as you'll see, the proposed substitute removes the proposed whereas clauses from the original proposed resolution from Mayor Castle that got into the nitty-gritty of fund balance and all of that. And my reason for doing that was, and replacing that with proposed whereas clauses, addressing kind of the path forward, in my view, of continuing to have these conversations with the district administration and Board of Education like we did a week or so ago as kind of the new path forward. I felt like during that meeting that we had, which I believe was a helpful meeting, it was a step in the right direction, the beginning of a lot of discussion on these issues that we effectively discussed and brought up the whereas clauses that Mayor Castle had proposed in that meeting. So my whereas clauses were an attempt to say this is how we want to go forward addressing this issue. We've started this conversation, we're going to continue it. And then the second issue I tried to address in the substitute is the number. And I think the number drives a lot of the conversation in this and drives a lot of what we've heard from folks. And as I was thinking about it following our budget sessions, in the mayor's proposed budget, he put $50,045,000. At the Assembly Finance Committee meeting, the mayor stated that he felt that was a reasonable amount. And this Assembly Finance Committee adopted that as part of its recommendation to the full Assembly. And given the implications of having a number at $41 million on school district employees and staff, and the uncertainty and the angst and the anxiety that it causes, I proposed a minimum funding resolution with a $50 million number because it seemed like that's where we were going. And I felt that we ought to have a number in our minimum funding resolution that at least more accurately reflects where we're going with this, so that we can alleviate that fear and anxiety among district staff and employees. I mean, perhaps my number of $50 million isn't the right number. Perhaps there are other numbers that other folks on the Assembly think is more appropriate. But regardless of where we go with this proposed substitute, I'd ask all of us to consider a minimum funding number that's higher than $41 million, so that we can we can help resolve that anxiety, because I think that that is real, and I think that that more than anything is what I was considering in proposing that number. And then since we're in debate, I can do a little bit more than just a bare bones staff report. So I want to say that I kind of offered this as a way to move forward based on our efforts a few weeks ago to have a joint meeting and to really get into the details of this issue, where I felt like the meeting raised a lot of issues that were uncomfortable and got good answers. Not all of our questions were answered, and I don't think that we agreed with everything that we heard, and still have questions on that. But that's where I was going with this, was to continue that conversation. I guess I say no attempted good deed goes unpunished, because I feel like a couple things got lost in this. One, I certainly didn't intend for a focus on fund balance and our ongoing discussions with the district to drop off. I think that's absolutely something that needs to go. And I don't, I apologize to the administration and Mayor Castle that was the implication of what I was proposing, is that everything is A-okay and we're good to go forward, because that's not my intent. We have a lot of talking left to do. And two, I think that in the district's messaging of that to their students and staff, it was kind of portrayed as or maybe interpreted by the recipients more than portrayed as a wholesale endorsement of the district's fiscal plan. And I don't think that we're there yet either. I think that we still have to talk through these issues. So, I was trying to, in proposing this, find a good path that goes forward that still allows us to address these important issues that we're facing, and provides a number that is a minimum funding number that gives a lot more certainty to the people who are on the ground in the schools, in the administration, doing their job day to day. So that's my intent. That's why I proposed this. You may agree or disagree, but that's why I wanted to get out there for folks' consideration.
Thank you. So I have Mr. Lawrence and then Mr. Tacky.
Well, I guess there's two aspects to this debate. One is the whereases, and the other is the minimum amount. And with regards to the whereases, I agree with Mr. Cooper that the discussion we had with the Board of Education, I think was a very good start. And we got some issues out that need to be discussed, and I don't think they're resolved in my mind. I don't know I won't think we'll know for sure whether they're resolved until May 22nd, when the school board adopts its budget. But I happen to think that the original resolution, as proposed by the mayor, those whereases I like more than what Mr. Cooper's coming up with, because the whereases that the mayor proposed identified, I think, a very important issue and a problem in this community, in that the school district over the years, intentionally or unintentionally, has accumulated more and more fund balance, at the same time cutting their programs year after year after year. And so in that regard, I'm not going to support the substitute, because I happen to think the whereases in the original resolution are spot on. I'm open to changing the minimum amount, and we'll be proposing to do so on the original. But we're talking about the substitute now, so I guess I'll let it go with that.
So Mr. Cooper, on this point, Ms. Bartels, are you also on this point, or are you just on the list?
Sure. I guess one thing that I wanted to add, and I think Mr. Lawrence, sorry, I was kind of combining notes as I was making my statements, and Mr. Lawrence makes a point about the whereas clauses. So, perhaps a better approach on my part would have been to delete all the whereas clauses, or just add my whereas clauses to the mayor's. I don't think that the mayor's whereas clauses are, invalid. As I said, I took them out because I thought they were part of our discussion. But I would consider, Mr. Lawrence, if you were going back to the original, recognizing the discussion and the efforts that we've made to move this issue forward are also important things to acknowledge, because where the mayor's whereas clauses are valid, I think so are the efforts that the district and the administration have made to talk to us about this. That was all.
So, I'm sorry.
So on this point, or
yes,
okay.
Yeah, if I may, and so earlier tonight we had public testimony, and Ms. Lawrence was referring to like the increased fund balance and things. I just want to kind of touch a point real quick that actually Mayor Castle we were talking about during our work session last week, and that's the revenue side of the budget. And the revenue side, understanding that the process the district goes through is to produce a budget without knowing the revenue side. We're doing our best guesstimate based on information, and be it the state, be it the local level. So when we start forecasting our budget, it is based on what we anticipate the revenue will come in at. Obviously, the final budget is based on the actual revenue that comes in. Now, as we ebb and flow through the year, there may be a lapse, as we talked about earlier. And we can debate the last couple of years. I think we did a good job. I want to compliment Mr. Cooper for bringing the work session together. But more importantly, I think that there's a little bit of a misnomer that we are sitting on a bunch of cash, if you will, but we haven't explained its usage, that we're going into a budget process and we have to know what numbers we're going to have available to us, what dollars we're going to have available to us, so that we can make those educated decisions based on the school district. So I just want to make sure that point is well stated. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but also if I may elaborate, we also, Dr. Gaborik has contract obligations to notify based on those estimates of funding via, if there's teacher contracts that are possibly in jeopardy, we're obligated by contract to let those teachers know. It creates a very tenacious work environment. We respect that. And I think this whole topic of discussion lends a lot of credence to forward funding. And again, we talked about a little bit about that last assembly during the work session. And I think it is something, if our state level can do the forward funding, I'm certainly thinking that at the assembly level we can do the same thing.
Okay, Mr. Techie.
Thank you. I guess I have a question then for the administration or folks that have a little more tenured life on this assembly than I do. I was under the impression that years ago we would always just put the like statute requirement limited at the bottom, like the smallest amount number, like $30-something million. Is that true? Like back in previous years, have we put that, and then you were actually obligated to actually have communications with the administration from the or with the school board to actually establish what the real funding number would be like?
There's been a number of very interesting discussions over the years and different numbers proposed. One year somebody was proposing $1, which doesn't meet the statutory requirement from the state of Alaska. I don't know that it certainly wasn't a common theme to put in the minimum required by the state. I think one year we might have. It was close to being the number that was initiated, but I don't think that's a responsible way to do this. I think you as the Assembly have a bit of an obligation to put some sort of a realistic bottom line in there, and I don't think anyone has ever considered the minimum state requirement to be realistic. So we typically have not done that. So historically what's happened is a number that is lower than, I don't remember us putting in, I can't swear to it, ever putting in the number that was proposed, in this case $50 million. I think this would be a first if we did that. But some years it's been close to that, like within $500,000 million range of that. Some years it's been $2 or $3 million below, depending on what the status of funding guarantees coming forward, because the school district keeps talking about doing a budget as a guesstimate of what they're anticipating receiving. We do the same thing. We guesstimate what the state's going to do for us, and so we have to be prepared for all scenarios, and we've had the state change our funding after we've set a budget. So it's a challenge for both the district and the borough in the same thing, and so typically there has been a little bit of wiggle room incorporated in the guaranteed minimum funding level to be able to accommodate the unknowns that we have coming forward.
Thanks. Then just more to the point, I also think it's important to add in the whereases of how we've been trying to move together and establish communications and get an understanding of how to spend the fund balance, et cetera. But I think that keeping all the whereases from the first resolution and then potentially adding in a couple that we actually find more appropriate, as a group, as an assembly, and then amending the number, if we so choose, from 41 up rather than going straight to the 50 with the substitute. So I'd be speaking against the substitute at this time.
Okay, thank you. So you're not proposing an amendment, you're speaking against the substitute?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then I have Mr. Gray and Mr. Lawrence.
Well, actually, Mr. Tacky just said what I wanted to say. I think that a lot of the original intent of the whereas, as Mr. Lawrence pointed out, are important to this discussion, and I too would be in approval of, in some way, shape, or form, amending these, but maybe perhaps on the original.
Okay. Before we move on, and before we lose the point, Ms. Dolan, would you speak to the legal status of us forward funding the school budget?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. It's been suggested that we should forward fund in additional years.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You mean outside of this year? So, yes. We don't have a sufficient fund balance for you to commit to forward fund, I think, is your first obstacle. I think the second is that you can't bind future assemblies. So you could make a commitment, but next year, the next assembly wouldn't be bound to it when they're setting the budget. And the way it's supposed to work is it's supposed to be looked at on an annual basis with all your competing functions and needs and your allocation of resources. That's how we budget for our borough.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, you're next. Mr. Gray, was that on that point?
I was just going to say that if there's anyone we need to get to forward fund education, it's the state.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
I'm going to move to amend the proposed substitute by adding back in all the whereas clauses that were originally presented in the original resolution from the administration.
Okay. Mr. Lawrence has moved to add back in all the whereas clauses that Mr. Cooper or that the substitute in front of us had proposed to remove. Is there a second? Second. And that's been seconded by Mr. Gray. Mr. Quist, did you get it?
Oh, that's all right. He was quiet. I was too quiet.
Apparently, our quiet second was Mr. Quist. So on the proposed amendment to the substitute, Mr. Lawrence, would you like to speak to that?
I'll simply say I think the whereases in the original resolution are valid and I think need to be said. And I think the whereases that Mr. Cooper wrote in this substitute are valid and can be said as need to be said. So I think that's why I made the amendment.
Any other discussion on the Mr. Mayor, on the amended substitute?
Yeah, I would support this. Some folks have said the whereas in the original seemed that like they were a bit pointed or accusatory. I didn't intend them to be that way. I intended that they be factual statements with audited numbers, easily checked, and to be addressing and clarifying topics that have previously been misunderstood or possibly misrepresented. So they describe the fiscal obligations and positions of our respective agencies here. And so what I was trying to do is just create a trail, a lawful, accurate, accountable trail, starting with the Alaska Constitution and taking us through to the current resolution and the basis for this current resolution going forward. I like the concept of creating a path forward, though, so my whereas is kind of ended with this resolution, but I also appreciate Mr. Cooper's in trying to pave a bit of a path forward. I think we need that also, and so they're probably all applicable to the situation, which is what this amendment would create. So thank you.
Mr. Cooper.
Thanks. I appreciate the amendment. The amendment I was going to suggest is to add those back in. I don't object to it. I do think, though, that we probably ought to, I'll just see if there's an amendment to the amendment that would be easy, which would be to delete lines 101 through 107, which is whereas clauses that were kind of the setup. To try to summarize in very few words all of the mayor's proposed whereas clauses.
Would you like to propose that? So
Yes,
you're
I make an
proposing
amendment to the amendment to delete lines 101 through 107.
So Mr. Cooper, and it's been seconded by Mr. Gray. So Mr. Cooper has proposed to amend the amendment to remove lines 101 through 103. It's been seconded by Mr. Gray on.
Sorry, 101 through 107.
107, I'm sorry, thank you. On the amendment, is there objection to the amendment? Siri objects, but no one on the dais objects. Okay.
You were saying.
Who knows? Sometimes we have magic technology. So back to the, so I see no objection, so the proposed amendment is amended, and we're back to the amended amendment. Is there any other discussion, debate on the proposed amendment as amended? Mr. Wojcicki.
Well, I'm a little concerned about how the school district went around about the process here. And I definitely could be reading or be suspicious of things that aren't actually happening, but I see evidence of these things happening, and so I hope I'm wrong. But even just from the school district's website, I printed out the little news release, and it's basically going out, and I assume it's similar to the text message waves that went out and the email blast that went out, but it seems pretty clear that it's intending to encourage people to testify on the substitute and support the higher number. And I do keep in mind that the school district is the lower organization. It's funded in part by the borough. And if you think about it in a different context, what if the school district was, instead of promoting a specific substitute here, what if they were promoting a specific candidate or an ordinance totally unrelated to the school district? I just think that would be inappropriate. And I think this is inappropriate too, or inappropriate. And we heard from testimony about students kind of, it sounded to me like they may have had the wrong understanding about this, that the $41 million was a serious recommendation that the school district may actually get cut to 41. I don't think anyone here thinks that's serious at all. It's just a guaranteed minimum and moving forward. So I do have kind of some issues with that, and I guess I'll just summarize it with something smells rotten in the state of Denmark to me there. And it's probably subjective, and my opinion of how the process should work, but that is kind of the way I see it. But at any rate, more specifically to our amended substitute, I believe that's where we are.
We're on the amendment.
As amended.
As amended, which is reinserting the whereases.
Oh, sorry, I kind of spoke a little out of turn. When it comes to reinserting the whereas, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bartels, before I'm assuming you want to respond to Mr. Wojcicki's comment, which was kind of not on point with our amendment.
Okay. I should have saved it for once we had amended or not amended.
But it seems, given that it's on point, I think it's reasonable for you to.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to say something about the same subject, so why don't we get this amendment done, and
then we'll
let
come
me
back
say
to
what
it.
I want to say, and then give Mr. Bartels a chance to respond.
So I will have a subset list for email. Okie dokie, back on the amendment as amended. Is there objection to the amendment as amended? Seeing none, we're back to our email, and Mr. Bartels, it sounds like Mr. Lawrence wanted to say something.
Yeah, you might as well.
On point, and then let you respond to both?
Yeah, I concur with Mr. Wojcicki, and you know, in basically I concur. The resolution before us is a state law requirement that we have to pass it, that we have to state what our minimum amount is, you know, within 30 days after they make the request or make their initial budget. And you know, in the 6 years I've been on the assembly, that minimum amount has never carried any weight. And you know, the reason why there was angst and anxiety among the community, among the students, the teachers, and the staff of the district is because the school district distributed, you know, this email saying, hey, you know, we got this resolution. I mean, I'm not just talking about the one recently, but when this resolution was originally publicized, you know, the superintendent issued a public statement attacking the mayor for undercutting, you know, for grossly undercutting the education of the students in this community by proposing that only $41 million be appropriated from the borough. I think this. I got to believe that the superintendent knew better, because she's been here before. She's seen these resolutions before, and we've never adopted the minimum, and so distributing this to all, you know, texting and emailing to all the, you know, all the staff and employees of the district, and it filtering on to the students, you know, I think is a disservice to them, and frankly to this assembly, because, you know, we've gotten inundated with emails from people worrying about something that they never had to worry about. The superintendent was here on Saturday at the finance committee when we adopted the mayor's recommended budget of $50,400,000 and excuse me, 450,000 is it?
45,400.
All right, 50,145,400. And the committee, the finance committee, adopted that, accepted that recommendation 9-0. She saw us do it, and yet she makes a big deal out of this. The administration makes a big deal out of this minimum resolution in light of that. So I'm frustrated by that, and I think it's adding a lot of stress. I think frankly it's it's manipulating people. And I'm kind of tired of it.
Mr. Bartels.
Thank you. First, Mr. Lejewski, I'm not from Denmark, so I have no idea what it smells like. But to the point, you know, the whole minimum implied is the minimum funding is implied that it's being considered. And so let's talk about the general public first, and then I'll come back to Mr. Lawrence's comments. But you know, the fact that the minimum fund of $41 million is out there, proposed or by the mayor, is that it's up for discussion, it's up for consideration, it's the bottom floor, if you will. And so the fact that that's out there, I think we can agree that that could be a possibility. Is that fair? I'll just say it's fair because that could be a possibility. Now, to Mr. Lawrence's point, I read the email myself, and I think maybe it falls on which side of the fence you're on here, whether the email was attacking the proposed tonight, the proposed changes, or the fact that it was support. And the way I read the email that was sent out was more in support of, not to be something that we are come in force and attack the assembly for anything less. So, you know, Dr. Gaborik is not acting maliciously here. I know that she was here on Saturday. I know that the assembly voted with regards to a 9-0 to fund at full funding. So the fact that this is even a debate is kind of questioning to me as to why we're spending the energy on it. So the fact, again, I think the email and the intent of the email was to show up support, not to question the assembly.
Okay, I have Mr. Quist and then Mr. Gray.
Thank you. I'd like to comment a little bit on this, email thread, pardon the pun, and then I would talk about the motion as a whole briefly, if I may. So, the school district sent out these kind of emails and messages in the past, and whenever it happens, best case scenario, it seems like it's in poor taste. The legal standing of it, I read it and I read it again. It seems like it's probably legal. There's no actual call to action. It's not calling for the election of a particular candidate or a political party or anything like that. So but it doesn't seem like it's necessarily the best use of the school's resources, especially given that I disagree with Mr. Bartel's response from a couple hours ago that email accurately represented the situation. I think that email neglected, best case scenario, neglected to provide details that were salient, that and it caused, you should look at our inbox. It blew up, and there are several dozen people that are concerned, that would be rightly concerned if this was a real issue or like an actual possibility. Okay, and I mean possibility in that more than 0.01% chance of it happening. Okay, so it could happen. Yes, we could fund at the state minimum, but or the 41 million. But nobody here thinks that, and nobody in the school district administration or in the Board of Education should either, if they've paid attention to the history of the process and they've been engaged in the process. We didn't even discuss the school budget at the committee meeting. We've already discussed it extensively. We will be discussing it again more. The superintendent was here, ready for questions, and we just approved it unanimously. And I think it might have been 8-0 because Mr. Roberts was absent. So he was. Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry. So it was unanimous either way you look at it. We approved it. I mean, it was the fastest thing we did because we knew we wanted to support the mayor's number. We knew we wanted to support this. So you asked the question, why debate this? Why waste energy on this? My response to that is because the school district is stirring this up and creating unnecessary antagonism. Now, Mr. Bartels approached me earlier when we had a moment and said that he wanted to continue this conversation. Otherwise, I really appreciate that. And I intend on asking my question that I asked a couple hours ago of Board of Education policy on these communications, and I'm going to send that to the president of the board and Mr. Bartels as well. And so we're all in this together. We all want to have a good community and great schools for the children that are growing up here. And really, I feel like the Board of Education and the school district administration are making this a more difficult process than it needs to be. Okay, and so I'll stop on that whole email thing for now. But I will talk about a couple other things and then probably be done for the whole thing. So I really appreciated Mr. Proxy's comment about process and how using, that really resonated with me. I think it's probably an unfortunate necessity. I think it definitely is right now, and maybe in the future, if we can align the state's schedule, the school district schedule, and ours in a different way, maybe this isn't necessary. But I do appreciate that we probably shouldn't be, even though we're not strictly appropriating the funds here. In effect, it seems like we are, and I think that doing something on the order of tens of millions of dollars through resolution is probably ideally not the best process. All of that being said, I personally, and I think we'll see if I speak for the body here in a few minutes, but we support education here in this borough, and the school and the borough is going to be meeting the full request from the school district, and so I think that we really just need to Okay, I mean, I think I made my point, and I would just, urge passage of this resolution. And going forward, I'd really like for us to be able to work together in, I guess one more thing I would say is, like, let's say I personally was of the mind that we need to give more than $50 million this coming fiscal year to the school district. Now, that's a case I could make. I would be able to make that case a lot better if I had more buy-in from the Board of Education and the administration. Okay, if I see that the school district, and we had testimony from a teacher earlier today saying everybody needs to give more, the borough needs to give more, the state needs to give more, the school district needs to give more, what's easier for other parties to contribute when they see that you're contributing as well. So if there's a political willingness to work together, we can achieve more. When there's this antagonism and, like, my little kingdom over here with my pot of money and your kingdom over there with your pot of money, it gets harder. So thank you.
So I have Mr. Gray, Mr. Tacky, Mr. Cooper, and Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Gray.
Okay, so quickly, on the communication portion of the resolution, I don't know if the emails and the text system send out the same information, but I can say that I received dozens of calls, texts, and emails about it from concerned parents and district staff and teachers, that they felt that this was not what they expected those kinds of messages to be portraying, that it was quote-unquote politicizing the use of that system. So I think it might behoove in the future, at least for parents or others, to know what exactly they're signing up for, because for a system that seems to normally be reserved for emergency messages, school bus is running late, or that there's a PTA meeting or some other emergency, to suddenly receive what they deem a political message, it's caught a lot of people off guard. I'll just say that. That's all.
Thank you. I have Mr. Tacky, and then Mr. Cooper, and Mr. Lawrence.
My comments are right along the same thread as Mr. Lejeski and Mr. Lawrence. It just, to me, when I got the text message, because I had somebody, like, shortly after I got my email, it says, hey, there's a proposed substitute. I had someone who has a student in the school system that's like, oh, you guys are going to increase funding? I was like, no, actually, we're not going to be increasing funding. It's the same. It's flat. We already have $50 million in our budget. We're intending to have $50 million. This is just the base resolution for a minimum fund, and we put $41 million in there to get a conversation started, is my interpretation of that, about fund balance and appropriate use, and possibly even running the risk of us actually losing our level of BSA based on fund balance levels is very cautious and concerning. And so to put out a text message and email thread for something that's used for emergency services and to have it mischaracterized at best is really disheartening and really frustrating and concerning overall. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, I have Mr. Cooper and then Mr. Lawrence.
Thanks. A couple things I want to say along the line started by Mr. Lejeski, because I don't know that the insinuation is intended, but this is a substitute of something I came up with on my own. I didn't talk to anybody about this. I wasn't asked by anybody to do this. This is all me. So to the extent you have a substitute in front of you, it's not because of anything that the school district did. It's because I thought about it and I offered it. On the email question, perhaps that's something that we need to add to our list of things to talk about in a future work session, how we communicate this, and whether or not the district is really whipping up the students, faculty, and staff or not. But I can tell you that regardless of whether they're doing it or faculty, students, staff feel that way on their own, it's real. With the $41 million. And I know that probably amongst my colleagues here in the dais, I have a unique perspective in that, I have 2 kids currently in school, and I walk into schools and people talk to me about it, and I feel that, so I get that it's not something that is, even though we might sit here and say, well, it's just a minimum funding resolution, it's the floor of what we're going to give you. That's not how people who are dealing with this in their careers and their jobs, who already have a lot to deal with especially my kids, because they're a handful, right? On a daily basis, and I don't think that it's something that they should have to worry about to the extent that they can't. I mean, I recognize that, yes, it's a minimum. Yes, all the indications from us are that we will give them more than the minimum. And I guess my question to us is, okay, well, if we don't want to say that $50 million is the minimum that we're willing to commit to, for me, I think it is, as I said, because we talked about it. I mean, it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck. Let's call it a duck. But if we're really saying, okay, we want to leave some room on the table so that we can negotiate, let's figure out what that number is. I can tell you, I think $41 million as a floor is not appropriate in this case. And I don't know that I have a better number, because, like I said, I'd probably pick 50 if it were me. But, there are a lot of other numbers that folks could pick. I mean, if we're talking about what do we need room in the budget for? What do we need to maneuver around? What are the concerns that we have in our budget? Is it Mary Saya? Is it, funding the things that we added to the budget over the budget session? I mean, what are the numbers that are attached to those? Is it $500,000 so that we can keep Mary Saya open? Is it, $1.9 million so that we can keep Mary Saya open and pay for the maintenance? I mean, I'm just throwing out some ideas here. I mean, I think we need to be genuine in setting a floor that really, if that's the goal, is to give us room to deal with our budget overall, then we ought to pick a number that's at least logically consistent with that, instead of picking, in this case, $41 million, because I think the effects are real. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
Well, I think the effects might have been real, but it's only because, from my perspective, the administration mischaracterized the importance of this resolution. If they hadn't sent it out, there wouldn't have been any anxiety or stress. And in my mind, the administration should have known better than making this an issue. I'm going to move to amend line 160 and change the amount of $50 million to $48 million.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Lawrence and seconded by Mr. Mr. Lejeski, to change line 160 to 48 million?
To 48 million, yes.
Okay. On the proposed amendment,
Well,
Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
All right. I don't want to be coy. I mean, it says Mr. Cooper is right. The majority of this assembly is going to, unless something big happens in the next 2 weeks, is going to approve the proposed budget from the administration, which is what was asked for from the school district of $51,145,400. I proposed $48 million to try to allay some fears, I guess, that I think are generated by the administration, unfortunately, and I could go with 50, but it's kind of a matter of principle. I don't want to reward that behavior. And as far as anxiety, this assembly is going to pass its budget on May 12th, and it's going to be known at that point exactly how much money is going to be appropriated to the school district. The school district won't pass its budget until 10 days later. And so I'm not real, I can understand stress and uncertainty. But, the point of the matter is, you can, well, let me just back up for a second. The use of emails to communicate to parents and teachers and staff, I don't have a strong opinion on that, but unless it's being used to manipulate people, to try to persuade people to think or take positions that are not based necessarily on reality. So I don't in principle have problems with using the email system to communicate to the staff and I guess to the parents, but it shouldn't manipulate. It shouldn't be slanted in such a way as to create an issue when there's no issue there.
So on the amendment, right now I have Mr. Quist and then I have Ms. Major on the amendment and Mr. Martels and Mr. Wojcicki. Mr. Quist.
Thank you. I would speak against this amendment to decrease the amount from 50 million to 48 million for a couple or maybe a few reasons. I mentioned earlier that, I think you kind of agreeing with some testimony we heard from a teacher, maybe it was before we were on the air in the 6 o'clock hour, about how everybody needs to give more. And I think that, and I agree, and I think that we need to put more in. I think the school district needs to take more from their fund balance. And I'd like the borough to be, all in as well to make it easier for them to do that. I'm saying, I'm asking for them to pony up, and I'm putting, like our collective money where our collective mouths are in that. And additionally, and maybe Mr. Bartels can flesh this out later. I'm under the impression that if we approve like a smaller amount, basically like anything less than the 50 million, it will, due to like the very close timetable here, it will trigger another wave of pink slips. And if we adopt the 50 million amount, that can be avoided. And so I won't spend any more time on this because this is not what's actually, we're going to get to do this again in a couple of weeks with the real ordinance, but I would speak against the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Major.
I too am going to speak against the amendment. I was fine with Mr. Cooper's substitute, getting to the fact that this is really just a procedural thing and not actually appropriating money. I think the frustration is, for me is that there are so many people that are really sort of reacting emotionally to this, when I do agree that giving folks a little bit of certainty in a very uncertain time, especially at this time of year, is okay, especially when it's just a procedural issue. I have no way of attributing the dozens of emails that we got today to whether or not it was a result of a text message or any type of other message that went out. I know I personally didn't know about that message until I got here today, so I don't have kids in school. But given that, I'm fine with the $50 million mark. I've spoken before that I think it's dangerous when we as an assembly sometimes just pick a number out of the air without really having a basis for doing it. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bartels, then Mr. Wojcicki, Gray, and Taki.
President Dodge, I don't have any comments on the proposed change. Mine's not related to that.
Okay, I'll put you on the other list. Oh, I have you there. Mr. Wojcicki.
Right, and this is related. I'm answering a question from earlier.
But it's on the amendment.
It is related because it comes down to the number here. And so the kind of question is, what's the probability that 41 million is the real one if we pass that? And I guess my answer to that is the probability of a talking pig walking in here and flying out the door afterwards after it gives testimony is higher. It's a black swan event. When it comes to 48, that's much more realistic as I don't think it's a high probability event, but it's more in the realms of something that you could envision happening. And so I'm going to speak in support of the 48 million, not because I want to see that actually happen, but really echoing an idea that Mr. Prox brought forward. If we accept up to the maximum here, we're telling everyone else, Mary Saya folks, and anyone else in the budget who may want some wiggle room, that we absolutely will not consider you, at least in terms of the school budget portion. And I think that's inappropriate to tell them, no, we're not going to consider that. And I know some of you guys are probably thinking, well, we could get the money from somewhere else. Okay, well, maybe get rid of Hammy Pool to save Mary Sire or whatever. Yeah, you can do those games, but it takes away even a tiny bit of wiggle room from this pot of money here for that purpose. I do think we're going to do the 50 million plus a little extra at the end, and the school district will get what it asked for. But I also have another reason to support the 48, let's say over the 41. And this is an appropriate use, I think, of the reserve fund, a very appropriate use. And I think it'd be very, very good for how you treat your employees. If you're able, in years where you have substantial reserves, you could use a portion of those to say, hey, when the borough comes in and promises less money than what we've asked for, we will allocate a portion of that to cover that as a contingency in case the borough doesn't come through with what it's passed at the finance committee. And that way you can avoid sending out pink slips. I think that's a wonderful way to treat your employees. But that's just me. That's what I'd do if I was on the board.
Okay, Mr. Gray.
I think maybe the mayor had something. Did you have something to that effect? Or?
Well, I'm in line.
Okay,
You're ahead of me.
I honestly forgot what I was going to say. So
Okay, that's why you defer to the mayor.
That's right.
Mr. Cassidy.
See if I can remember.
This is just to go along the lines of what Ms. Major was saying. It's not just a procedural thing. We can't go underneath whatever number we put here. So we have to put whatever would be the minimum that we would give. So if we did put 50, we can't go down to 48 later. So if we put 48, I think it does show that, hey, there is this little bit of wiggle room. If we did want to like save Mary Saya or other budgetary concerns. But the other thing I'd also mention is along Van Lawrence's point was the fact that why reward that kind of behavior, like sending out mass emails to misinform individuals of what this actually represents to get them to contact us and lobby us. So I think 48 is a reasonable amount, and like Mr. Lejeski said as well, showing over the, between now and May 12th that hey, we're willing to utilize some of our funds, and we're more apt to be like, yeah, we can utilize our funds too. So I'm definitely speaking highly in favor of the 48.
Was that on?
I now would like to tell, yeah.
Okay.
But I'll wait till after.
Okay, thank you. And the clerk is reminding me that our budget meeting that we expect to be adopting this is May 10th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. So, Mr. Lawrence, I have you next. Then I have Mayor, and then I have Mr. Bartels.
I have a question for Mr. Bartels. If this assembly were to pass this amendment and reduce the minimum from 50 million to 48 million, would that result in more pink slips between now and May 10th?
The answer to that would be yes. We the pink slips, as they're known, we're obligated to have them into the employees' hands by the 15th. They usually are going to be mailed out by the 9th.
By the May 15th?
Correct. So they're required to be there by the 15th. So they would end up getting mailed on the 9th.
That it seriously takes, everything goes through Anchorage, but you're saying that the administration or the district wouldn't wait until May 11th?
It's not a question of
what we do?
Well, it's not a question of waiting. It's an obligation to meet contract. It's a contract obligation to have it to the employee. I can't speak for the mail.
So you're saying that letters going out on the 11th of May it won't be received by the 15th?
I'm telling you the practice of the district is all. I can't speak to the process of mail. This is not something that's been created in the last hour, Mr. Lawrence. This is standard protocol, historical protocol. Hopefully that can.
So how? And Mr. Bartels, you may not be the one to answer this, but in the past, has pink slips been mailed out in response to the minimum, what the ordinance regarding the minimum support was going to be?
I'm going to answer that, but I would assume that's a safe bet.
You would assume yes?
I would assume yes.
All right. And the president seems to confirm. So if we pass 48 million instead of 50 million as the minimum today, how many pink slips are going to go out because of that?
I'm not in a position to answer that.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and then Mr. Bartels, and Mr. Quist, Mr. Gray, and Ms. Major. I'll remind you of the list. It's okay. Mr. Mayor.
So,
on the amendment.
It is on the amendment. I have never advocated for less than the $50 million, although I've been portrayed as such. I never have. And I don't intend to change that philosophy at all going forward, that I would like to fully fund the school district in the amount that they requested. And I've never said anything other than that. I also made it pretty clear that when this resolution came forward in the first go-around, that the $41 million was put in there after discussions with some assembly members to create a discussion, which we're having now. That's a good thing that we're having a discussion. But I never even implied that that was a figure that I was recommending or proposing or that the school district should plan on. And although I have been portrayed as such repeatedly, which I find frustrating. The number that is currently on the table at $48 million, I think, is close to what I would personally choose. I don't get to vote, but I think it not wise to guarantee what we truly are expecting to fund, in that we have a number of variables in front of us to make some decisions on. Some of them are in the multi-million-dollar potential category. And should you choose to want to fund some of those things, and I think from what I'm hearing some of you may, I'm not sure where that money's coming from. So I'm not suggesting or even implying that I think we should add those things to the budget, but what I am saying is there's some question marks facing us. We don't know what the state's going to do for us or to us in the near future either. And so guaranteeing what we're expecting to contribute is not really typical, nor I think wise at this particular point. I think you need to consider some sort of reasonable wiggle room in here, and I am not suggesting that $41 million is a reasonable level. I think the school district should have much more certainty than that going forward, and a number that's closer to what our expectations are, but allows you folks the room to at least have another discussion subsequent to this one regarding our budget as we work on it, and maybe more information from the state of Alaska, both on our funding and on the school district's funding. We will know more and make a better educated decision in a little time from now. I think that's appropriate. I am a little discouraged because I understand that the school district, if they don't have the money, needs to send out pink slips. What I don't understand is they do have the money. If we were to only fund 48 million, they could easily fund all of those contracts with fund balance. There is not a problem in doing that. If they choose to not do that, that's their choice, and we can't interject ourselves into that decision. That's not our authority. That's the school board's authority. But if they choose to not fund those things, yeah, then they can send out pink slips. But I don't know why you would want to create that angst under the circumstances with the fund balance that we're aware of over a discrepancy of $1 million or $2. It certainly is well within the range of what they could afford to do going forward. So if I was going to pick a number, I'd pick 49, but 48's close to 49. So I'm kind of flexible on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mr. Bartels and then Mr. Quist.
Mayor Castle, thank you for your comments. I'm going to speak for myself for a second. I do believe you're a proponent of education, so I appreciate that. My only comment to this is that the whole proposed 48 million, if the Assembly knows that it has an 8-0 vote, that they're going to fund 50 million, is this really a healthy discussion to have? I mean, if it's a discussion because of the fact that 48 million is a real possibility, back to why we're here, it's a basement fund, but you're telling me that it was an 8-0 vote that we're going to be fully funded at the requested amount, then is this discussion valued of its time, other than unless you're going to penalize the school district for some communication issues, which I find absurd. So if it's 50 million, then it's 50 million. And if it's 48 million, then there is cause for public testimony to come in here with concern. We laid out the fund balance spin down last week. We were very clear and transparent with its 4-year life expectancy. If we meet those numbers at the end of 4 years, we'll be just over 1.5%. So I mean the play is, or the plan is in place. We've been very upfront with it. I just ask you to do your own soul searching and ask if you truly are planning to support the school district at what you say, 8-0 vote of $50 million. Why is this even necessary? This discussion.
I have.
On
the point? Or
in response to his point, the
Okay,
question
sure.
that he was asking, we're struggling. You're talking about open communication and such. I don't think we're there. I think the 4-year plan that was presented has major holes in it, which we pointed out at the last meeting. It totally ignores lapses and other revenues and other projections for increasing revenue and lapse funds. So that's not really a plan, and it's something that we should be talking about in the future. I was particularly discouraged on Saturday when we had a budget work session. And the finance chair went out of his way to give a date certain time for the school district to present their budget and discuss their budget with this assembly on Saturday. They're the only organization that had that opportunity. All of the directors and departments in the borough had to sit around waiting all day long, but we wanted to make sure the school district had every opportunity for success and to communicate. The only person that showed up was the superintendent, and she couldn't answer questions that the assembly had. And the assembly said, well, we're going to approve this at 50, but we've got more questions that need answers before we can finalize this, and we're going to be having more discussions. And so that's why it's hard to guarantee a minimum of 50 at this point when they acknowledged that they had questions. And I don't understand why you would come to present a budget without your chief financial officer. I certainly wouldn't go out anywhere without Ms. Brady if I was presenting our budget to any political body like the Assembly, and the importance of this. I don't think we have any open and transparent government. And I'm getting more and more frustrated every time a day goes by, and we get mixed messages and different numbers. The television report from the superintendent had 3 different numbers in the same report. The TV crew got all of their numbers from the school district. And how does the public know what number to believe? And they're saying they're confused because we're disagreeing on numbers. I don't know that we have any disagreement on any of these numbers. We're going from audited numbers. But the public is hearing different numbers in the same report from the school district. I find that very frustrating. And so there's a lot of things yet on the table to be discussed and determined. The Assembly said, okay, we currently think it's 50 million is what we want to support, but we need some more answers going forward. We couldn't get it on Saturday at the session, and I'm struggling with why we want to guarantee what we think maybe works, but we don't really know at this point in time. I think if we'd gotten answers on Saturday, it could be a different story, but we're not having open and transparent communication.
Okay, Mr. Bartels.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Mayor Castle, I wasn't here on Saturday, obviously, and I don't know what questions went unanswered with regards to the presence of the CFO or not. My question would be, was she requested? Maybe that's irrelevant. Maybe that should have been here. But the point being is, I'm glad you brought up the audit because we do use the same audit firm. The numbers are transparent. We're not moving the numbers around. We don't accuse us of misinterpreting numbers or giving the media. I can't speak for the media or the newspaper. But our numbers, we use the same audit firm as you do. They're right in front of us. And so the fact that we're giving misinformation, if there's questions involved, we need to answer those questions. And I think that last week's session was a step forward in the right direction. I would encourage that to continue on. Again, under different calendar timing. But to say that we're not being transparent, I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, I have a list. I have Mr. Quist, Mr. Gray, Ms. Major, and Mr. Lawrence.
And we're on the amendment, right?
And we are on the amendment.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So there was a comment made earlier, in support of this amendment that we don't want to reward the quote, bad behavior of the school district by giving them, the full amount that they've requested. So that's one way to look at it is, this would reward that, air quotes here for the radio people, bad behavior. But another way to look at it is, you're potentially punishing the staff, and maybe by extension the student body by creating this uncertainty and being a domino that triggers maybe unnecessarily, because there are other dominoes that don't have to fall, this wave of pink slips going out. So as uncomfortable as I am with my perception of the school district's behavior, I still don't feel that to be a very compelling reason. I was also very disappointed that the CFO decided not to show up to the budget session. That was kind of strange. I'd like to move to amend the amendment to $49 million.
Second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Quist and seconded by Mr. Gray to amend the amendment to $49 million.
If I can
Speak to that, and then.
Yeah, so, I was listening to the mayor. I think he made a lot of very good points, and I was listening. I was thinking while I was like, well, maybe I could get behind this if it was 49, and then he said, well, that sounds like something that we could do. So I thought that's something that I could see myself voting for, so I'm offering it now.
Yeah, I saw Ms. Major's hand.
So I'm going to just jump in here, and you can take me off the other list. So one, I understand it's not just procedural, but I think the way that we were going in the discussion, especially as we talked about maybe like punishing the school district or, not rewarding bad behavior, I just didn't feel like that was the right way to go. And I still don't, I'm not comfortable when we just pick a number, right, without some sort of reason for that number. At this point, 50 million, 49 million, I will vote in support of the amendment to the amendment. But I do think that we should be cautious in not reacting emotionally to something that happened today.
Okay, I have Mr. Quist next.
I think that my comment can wait till the main motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
On the amendment, proposed amendment, Mr. Wojcicki.
I guess along the lines of Ms. Major's comments, I think you're correct. My instinctual, emotional reaction is I want to punish the school district, but I will moderate myself and take that off the table. But I just acknowledge that it's there, and because it feels annoying anyway. But to give you a rational reason for even 49 over 48, but they're close enough, is that if it's close to the actual expected budget, it's my belief, as I've stated before, the school district could take some of those reserves, have them as a contingency fund to avoid any pink slips, in addition to people who are expected to actually be laid off. And I think that is prudent management for the school district. And at 49, we're only talking a little over $1 million to be used as a contingency fund, which wouldn't actually be spent, because I really think we're going to come close to the actual 50 mark. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, on the proposed amendment to the amendment, any other discussion? No, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I don't want to characterize this as just picking a number, because in my mind, it's not just picking a number. I'm kind of looking at our budget process that has been moving forward, and we're trying to pull numbers that you folks requested for you. We're still working on those numbers, but we are worst case scenario, and I'm not saying that this is where we're likely to go, but we could be short about $4 million, depending on what happens with all those big question marks we were talking about, like Mary Saya is one of them. And so in looking at that, and trying to figure out how we would come up with that if that's what you choose to try to fund, I think that we might, knowing the fund balances involved here and knowing how things play down, I think that we would be responsible to not use all of our fund balance to come up with that $4 million, but potentially ask the school district to contribute $1 million to that also. And essentially, because we're the backstop again for them, and our fund balance is smaller than theirs, I don't think it would be appropriate for us to try to absorb all of that. That being said, I don't think we should be adding things to our budget. I mean, that decision is yours. And I am not suggesting or advocating that we do any of those things. I think it's a contingency program. What if, worst case scenario, we could have to go there? And I don't think that even in the worst case scenario, we would need, or I would recommend at that time, more than $1 million from the school district, and picking up about a quarter of the shortfall that we could be taking a look at. So it wasn't something I just picked out of the sky when I said that I would kind of support that number. I think there is some logic there. Thank you.
Ms. Bartels.
Thank you. I just want to point out that should the number come in at 49 million, that's over $2 million less than the current fiscal year. That being said, I also want to make sure that the Assembly is aware that the amount that the local government contributes to the school district has an effect on state funding as well. So they are directly tied. That if the local funding is reduced, the state has the option also to reduce funding to the local school district. So they are tied one-to-one correlation. And to what that percentage is, it's not coming to me off the top of my head, but it is a real thing.
Okay, on the proposed amendment as amended. Further discussion? I think, yes, Mr. Wojcicki.
I've got a question. Is there enough time in terms of public notification and so forth for the school board to have a contingency fund in case the borough doesn't live up to what it said it will do in terms of the finance committee recommendation, and not send out pink slips to people who are not intended to be laid off?
I'm going to say that not send out pink slips is not an option. I'm going to say that is there enough time to maybe come forward with another plan? I think that's possible, yes. I'm I'm just giving you my opinion, but the pink slip issue is a contractual situation.
I don't know if that answers the question. I mean, the idea is, let's say we promise 1 million short of what we've said to the finance committee.
Right.
If
I can
you
only
had
speak
$1 million contingency fund plus whatever the impact on state funding is.
You're asking me to speak for the rest of the board, and I can't do that. I can only give you my opinion.
Well, that's a suggestion that maybe in future years we should do something like that, so we don't have to send out unnecessary pink slips.
But it's not. I mean, today we're talking about $1 million, if you will. Future years, it could be a much larger hurdle. So I don't know that that's realistic. So again, I'm just giving you my opinion.
Okay, are we ready to vote on the proposed amendment as amended?
We're on the amendment to the amendment?
That is correct.
For $49 million.
That is
Mr.
correct.
Tackey?
No.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Ms. Major?
Yes.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Mr. Lajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Mr. Lawrence?
No.
Ms. Dodge?
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
4-4.
Fails 4-4. And we're back to the proposed amendment before the amendment. So we're back to the amendment at 48 million. And I have a list on that. I have Mr. Gray, Mr. Lawrence, and Mr. Quist right now.
My points have been thoroughly made.
Okay.
I yield to everybody else.
Mr. Lawrence on the amendment as unamended.
Well, the mayor had some comments that Mr. Bartels responded to. Let me just say that I've been a big supporter of the school district. In this is my 6th year on the assembly, and in all 5 previous years, I've worked hard to increase the amount of appropriation to the school district over and above what was proposed by the mayor. I won't be doing so this year because of the amount of the fund balances that the school district has. And let me just say right now, and I think I made one of the comments. There's no room to get personally involved and say, well, we need to punish the school district. As if we do that, we're punishing our kids. And so if I conveyed that, and I think I did, I regret it, and I take it back. I'm frustrated with the administration. I'm frustrated with the administration, but that is not going to keep me from supporting education. But what the mayor said, yeah, I think from my perspective, there is not transparency from the school district regarding finances. I asked a question of Ms. Hawes, in that meeting about why did the risk management fund surplus increase from 722,000, I believe, to over 7 million in 1 year. And she stated something like, well, that money can be used to reduce healthcare costs or something. But really what it turned out to be is, yeah, we can pay it by putting it in there. We'll have to spend less next year. It'll be there for next year. When the real answer was we had to put at least 1.9 or 1.7 million, get it out of general fund, or we would be violating state law and would be getting a penalty the following year. That's what I suspected was the reason for this big surplus, tenfold increase in the surplus or in the fund balance of risk management, was to avoid that. And I couldn't even get that straight answer out of the school board. So I'm frustrated by that. And as far as, there's been a lot of questions asked, whether it was in this room or upstairs in the saucer room last year, regarding finances that we didn't get good answers on. And it's been going on now for over a year. My question for Mr. Bartels is, if we pass this ordinance or this resolution at 48 million, and you all, of course, mail out the notices on May 9th, and the following day we pass a budget for the recommended amount of 50,450,000 or 45,000, could you maybe communicate through your email and texting system? Would you communicate or notify the people who are going to receive those pink slips that they don't count?
I would like to think that there's a process in place, Mr. Lawrence, that some sort of retraction could be made. I would assume that retraction is probably going to be in the same method that the original message was sent, so there might be somewhat of a delay. Again, I'm not privy to how that might work, but that would be my best guess.
Well, all right, I don't want to argue with you because you know better than I, but I mean, certainly the school district has no problems communicating with its staff and its employees by email, and we've seen the results of that. So I find it a little frustrating to say, well, we're going to mail something out, 6 days before it has to be received by the teachers, but if it turns out it was unnecessary, that we're going to just mail out something else, maybe the following Monday, and say never mind, and let them worry, let them just wonder whether they're going to have a job or not for.
I respect your position, Mr. Lawrence. I think you're making a valid point. I'm not suggesting that an email couldn't work. I just don't know exactly that process, if I can put it that way. I would like to think you're right. I want to make sure, and I don't believe this is the Assembly nor the Mayor's position, but this topic that we're talking about is one of the largest detriment to the morale through the school district that we face every year because of contract obligations. So it's not the district's position that this is something that we just do arbitrarily to stir it up. And I know you know
Okay,
that.
Just one more follow-up. So it's not state law, it's a matter of contract between the teachers union and the school district.
Right.
Okay. Ms. Dolan has a comment.
No, I'm sorry.
I do want to clarify. It's a state law requirement.
That's right. Excuse me.
And so if a tenured teacher is going to be laid off, there's certain triggers that have to happen in order for that to happen. But if that is going to be the case, then it has to be in writing, delivered before May 15th, or if it's going to be postmarked, it has to be sent registered mail by May 15th. So it is a statute requirement that is repeated in the collective bargaining agreement. But I just want to be clear that it's not just arbitrarily negotiated.
Thank you, Ms. Dolan.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bartels, I believe I have you next. If not, you could say pass, and
I'll pass.
we'll go on to Mr. Quist.
Thank you.
On the amendment.
So yeah, on the amendment, so and kind of the process a little bit, like, because we're trying to figure out what the number is, and the question is, like, how do we come to this number? Or the claim is we're just kind of picking it out of thin air. But I mean, the process is the school district comes to us with a request. We have a month to get back to them. If we don't get back to them, their request is granted. So basically, we have to do something. Otherwise, we cede our legislative appropriation power to the administration of the school district, which doesn't seem an appropriate use of our constituents' monies or the powers they place in the assembly. So I mean, I think that that's why we're doing this. There's a range. Obviously, it's going to be above the state minimum, required minimum, and it's going to be below the maximum. And we have, like, so this one piece is the biggest part of our budget, single part of our budget, but there's all of these other moving parts. There's a constituency for all of them. And so we need to balance that. A couple of things have been said in the last few minutes that make me feel more comfortable with this amendment as unamended. The idea that, there are several $1 million that could end up being a surprise here in the coming weeks, and if that does come to fruition, I think that it's appropriate that the school district then do share in some of that unexpected burden, given their current cash position versus ours and the nature of the flow of money between the organizations, that seems appropriate. And also the fact that pink slips don't have to go out even without some kind of action from the school board. There's this idea that, okay, you don't have to send out pink slips because you got the money and you could just fund it. But regardless of funding it, you could just wait until we have an actual decision and send out any necessary pink slips at that point via registered mail. So there's no I'm very grateful that the attorney shared that with us, and I'm kind of disappointed that hasn't been part of the conversation, because I've been hearing, we're going to be mailing out pink slips unless you fully fund this today, and that seems to be not accurate. So I would speak in favor of the $48 million value. Thank you.
Okay, I have Mr. Mayor next.
So this is something that's bothered me for some time, and I want to be clear about it. Yes, the school district's contracts require sending out pink slips, but the trigger for that is budgetary limitations. They have to not have the money to be able to fund those positions. That's the trigger. In this case, as in other years, they have the money. They're choosing. It is a choice of the school districts, not this assembly's or mine. It is a choice by the school district to say, we aren't going to fund these, and we're not going to budget for that. They can make that statement, but it has to be a budgetary limitation. And clearly, we understand that $1 million or $2 million here is not a budgetary limitation for them. They are not obligated to send out pink slips unless they choose to do so. Their choice, not ours.
Mr. Bartels.
I just want to respond. I would agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that it is a choice, but two things here. One, we have a Citizen Budget Review Committee who we're following the recommendations of our citizens with regards to how we will spend down our fund balance. So that's a big piece of our consideration. The other point I want to make is even at $50 million, that still is going to result in short funding. We're still going to have pink slips that are going to going out. Just to kind of give you a comparison, the budget as it was presented at $50 million, we're looking at an increase of PTR of 2 students on average. So where do you draw that line? If the $12 million in fund balance is what we're talking about moving forward, is the number. So where do you draw that line? We have budgeted according to $50 million, which is a 2 PTR increase from last year, which results in pink slips that are going to go out because of the fact. So to your point, do we spend $10 million? And that's again, goes against the responsibility of the board as it's laid out in our governing body and against our Citizen Budget Review Committee recommendations. So we have presented our budget. We can debate whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, but that's the reality of where we stand right now. And the only other comment I would make to Mr. Lawrence's earlier comment, this is a great discussion, but I wish it were happening in October, not in the final hours. We could hammer out a lot of this in a much better way. And the questions that you have, whether it be from the CFO, the president, or Dr. Gaborik, we could make sure those questions are answered in a timely fashion.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, Ms. Bartels, you said that the budget, the surplus, or the general fund surplus at the end of this year would be $12 million?
The operating fund balance that we have on our sheets is that $12 million. Operating fund.
Operating, and that being the general fund?
Yes.
Okay. just looking at the memo regarding the spend down of the surplus shows that your general fund balance was 22,700,000 as of last June 30th. You're anticipating taking $7.5 million out of that. That leaves you over 15 million.
We will end in after year 4. That fund balance will be less than $4 million. Yeah, the spend down this year is $7.5 million.
$7.5 million from more than 22.5 million, right? So that's
just shy of the spend down is 2.8 million for the next 4 years. Right. At the end of that time, the balance would be 3.9 million.
Assuming you had no lapse.
Correct.
Assuming that the $3 million that you're going to save in healthcare costs don't show up.
Absolutely. And let me just say this, again, we're looking in the crystal ball as we move forward, as we sit here today. I think, again, as we end or get close to the end of the school year, these conversations need to happen, because if there is a surplus, then that needs to be recognized. We're just mapping out the next 4 years as we estimate them to be.
Did you estimate that the surplus would increase from 17 million to 31 million this year?
From 17 million, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The general fund surplus increased from the end of 2016, from June 30th, 2016 to June 30th, 2017, it increased from 17.7 million to 31 million.
I don't have that number in front of me as far as the numbers you're referring to. I can only talk to where we're at with regards to the audited numbers that are before us and how we anticipate spending those down.
And that's where these numbers came from.
And that's where these numbers came from. Right. Yeah. So
as far as I guess what I'm frustrated is, why are you all so sure that the spend down is going to take you down to 3.9 million when did you guys deliberately increase your fund balance by 14 million this last year? Was
deliberate? No. We went into this year. We went into fiscal year 18 with a budget of 204 million. Our budget next year is 196 million. We spent $7.5 million this school year to reach that $204 million. Otherwise, last year, to the mayor's comment earlier, last year we probably would have been at a budget of about 196 million. The board elected to spend $7.5 million this school year so that we weren't there. And then we planned moving forward, based on the information I shared with you, how we plan the next 4 years. If there's a surplus at the end of the year, I can't speak to that at this point.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cooper and then Mr. Quist.
I was just going to say that, as I said at our joint finance committee meeting the other week, my only regret is we didn't have this conversation sooner in the year. And of course, that is again playing out again now, as it does every year about this time. So, I want to go on the record and say, and hopefully get the same commitment from the school board members that are present, that, whatever role I'm in on the assembly next year, I'm committing now to starting this conversation a lot sooner. And I hope that we'll get that same buy-in and from the board members who are here too.
Absolutely.
My list seems to be, yes, Mr. Lajewski.
For Mr. Bartels, I just wanted to say, I recognize that you're in a very difficult position tonight, and you've handled yourself very well. I think the school board should be proud.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, you're on the
amendment, and he has some numbers to share with you. Are we ready to vote on the amendment, which is to reduce line 160 to 48 million? I think we're ready, clerk.
Mr. Tackey?
Yes.
Mr. Lajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Mr. Quist?
Yes.
Ms. Major?
No.
Mr. Gray?
No.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Ms. Dodge?
No. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none?
I'm not changing my vote.
Okay. Mr. Cooper changed his vote.
5-3?
So it's adopted 5-3. And I think we need a break. You guys ready for a break, or are you ready to just vote on the whole resolution? Okay. We're back on the resolution as amended. They appear to be discussed out. Going once, twice. Mr. Bartels.
I'd just like to make a comment, I guess, more than anything. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the questions. Earlier there was a comment made, and Mr. Quist, I did approach him off the side here, more of clarification, because I didn't like the way our banter was going back and forth, and I didn't want to end on a rough note. I want to welcome dialogue. I want there to be questions that we're answering. I don't want there to be this distrust or this misnomer that we're somehow being dishonest or deceitful. I'm speaking for the district here. And so that's why I approached Mr. Quist earlier. And with that, we're not, we communicated a message today in support of funding for the district. There was not a hidden agenda, and I might also add that on the borough's Facebook page, the mayor wrote a note. I encourage you to participate, get the facts, and engage with your elected school board leaders. The Assembly will be meeting tonight to act on the proposed minimum funding resolution. So one could say that the mayor himself invited public comment tonight to come forward. I just want the Assembly to know that there is not an angst or a hidden agenda here to stir up controversy. That is the biggest thing that we try to avoid with our employees, and there's over 1,600 employees within the district that are anxiously waiting to see how next year's funding is going to come in. And I think that to assume or to say that we would somehow play with those emotions is just not true. And I want to make sure that you all understand that we're acting in good faith. We do welcome public testimony. at our meetings, whether we encouraged it tonight to come forward and participate at the assembly, I can honestly say it was in good faith.
Okay. So I'm betting the body wants to roll. Mr. Gray.
Well, in response to that, I don't necessarily think that was the full intent, but perception is everything, as they say. And I think the perception here by many, I think that the conflicting testimony shows that there was at least a perception, not just by us, but by staff members, parents, members of the public, others. So I just hope that we can, like, as you said, I completely agree with you. I hope we can have this dialogue continue to be open and start it a lot sooner. Yep, I fully agree. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quist and Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Bartels for approaching me and saying that we should continue this conversation. Otherwise, he was concerned about the tone, and and I share that concern too. I brought a lot of that tone, but I would say, and I assume that the school district administration is listening, and I would hope that the Board of Education brings this message to them as well. But I think a lot of that tone came from the administration and from their public relations decision to send that message out. It painted an incomplete picture. The character of it is very different than the message that Mr. Bartels just read from the borough's Facebook page, which is simply a statement of meeting times and saying get facts, participate. The messages that were sent out from the district omitted relevant details, and although they didn't have a call to action, the last sentence was basically as close as you can get to one without it being one. So about this specific item. So and the information was incomplete and, in my opinion, misleading. So and that came from the school district administration, and everybody here wants to work together, but when that's coming forward and we're hearing from people getting upset when they don't need to be getting upset over something that's not actually happening, I won't belabor it much more, but that's in my opinion, one of the big causes of this difficulty in communication.
Okay, I have Mr. Cooper and Mr. Mayor.
Thanks. I was just going to let folks know I changed my vote on the last amendment to make it 48 million because I saw that vote failing 4-4, and I didn't know where it was going from there because I didn't see a $50 million amount passing, and I could only see it going lower. Therefore, that's the reason I switched my vote on that. That said, I still think that that the $50 million number, based on what we've talked about and where we're at, is a better number. So I'm going to be voting no on the resolution overall, but I appreciate the discussion that this issue and my substitute have engendered. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor and then Mr. Gray.
Well, I too appreciate Mr. Bartels being here, and I think he represented the school board well. And I'm looking forward to open dialogue. I think we absolutely need to do that going forward. I don't think that the situation is as late in the game as what it's being portrayed, however. There have been a number of opportunities for dialogue that the school administration, not the board, but the administration has not taken advantage of. I was particularly distressed on Saturday to have just the superintendent here. I believe that's the first time in history that the chief financial officer from the school district wasn't here to represent the budget. Last year it was just the chief financial officer and not the superintendent. So we need to have this dialogue. It's hard to do it when the other person isn't in the room to have the discussion with. So most of my frustration, and I'm sure you're hearing frustration in my voice, but it really is with the administration, much more so than the school board. And I would encourage the school board to get a little more engaged and down in the weeds with the specifics of what's going on here. Because I don't know exactly how much you're aware of on the day-to-day operations of things, but there's a number of changes and in operation and structure and stuff, different things going on at the school district that I find troubling and are disconnecting communication at every level possible between the school district and the borough, which I find incredibly distressing. I'm all about working together and building bridges, and I've worked hard to do that with just about every organization that this borough is affiliated with in the entire state. And I like to think I've been successful on every and all fronts except the school district, and we've gone backwards in my tenure here. And I don't like that, and I don't think it's appropriate or good for our community. I think we need to figure out how to communicate better, and I am certainly willing to be at the table to do that, and I look forward to those discussions going forward. And I think if we at least have the opportunity to have them, we can work through these things. But we didn't have that opportunity on Saturday. Thank you.
Mr. Bartels.
Mr. Castle, I appreciate your comments, and I know that that is your desire. I feel it, and I would like to welcome that conversations to take place. I'd be happy to be a part of that, mending of fences or whatever the communication gap there might be to help alleviate any concerns or any messages that are not conveyed clearly to not only the mayor's office but also to the assembly. So with your invitation, I'd like to contact you and see if we can't figure out where that separation lies and be proactive in mending those fences.
Sounds good.
Mr. Gray.
I'll try to be brief so we can vote. So I'd like to associate myself with Mr. Cooper's remarks. I too, on principle, will be voting no on this. I think that while as a finance committee, we added, if my calculations are correct, we've added several million things, or several hundreds of thousands to the budget, the base budget as it is, and we have some tough decisions ahead of us. I think that we all very unanimously and quickly, even though we didn't have much opportunity for some questions that we wanted to ask, voted in favor of the $50 million amount. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so we are on the voting on the substitute as amended. Yes, Mr. Quist.
Thank you. I just would like to kind of continue on Mr. Gray's thought and just point out the distinction between our action as Finance Committee and our action today. That, yeah, we, kind of rubber stamp the 50 million through, and it's probably going to end up being 50 million, but that action was a recommendation to the Assembly from Finance. It's not binding at all. This action that we take today is binding. So I just wanted to make sure that distinction was clear.
Yes, Mr. Tacky.
I'm just wondering if we should have the substitute carry the main then, given the fact that if we have many people choosing to vote no already, then what's going to happen is if we don't actually have a resolution, it will just be whatever was supplied to the school district, right?
My head hurts. Hold on a minute.
You go back to the mayor's.
We can go back to the mayor.
That's correct. That's correct. If the
So this
substitute
fails.
it goes back
We
to
go back to the mayor's.
unless it carries.
Back to the mayor's what?
Mayor's resolution as unamended. So it sounds like we have people that are ready to vote. So clerk, please call the roll.
Substitute as amended. Mr. Quist.
Amended, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Gray.
No.
Mr. Tacky.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Ms. Major.
No.
Mr. Lejeski.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
And Ms. Dodge.
Yes. Does anyone want to change their vote?
It's 5-3.
Seeing none, the proposed substitute.
Now you need to vote on the main
Carries.
motion as substituted.
So now we're going to vote on the main ordinance as substituted.
Ready?
Ready.
Mr. Lejeski.
Yes.
Ms. Major.
No.
Mr. Gray.
No.
Mr. Tacky.
Yes.
Mr. Quist.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
And Ms. Dodge.
Yes. Would anyone like to change their vote? Seeing none,
5-3.
the amendment as amended, substitute as amended, passes, I believe. That takes us to citizens' comment. If you guys want, I presume you don't want a 5-minute break. Just checking. That takes us to citizens' comments, continued, and this is for items not scheduled for public hearing. It's a second bite at the apple. I'll open citizens' comments. Continued for items not scheduled. I don't have anyone coming forward. I don't have anyone signed up, so I'm going to close public hearing. Yes, ma'am.
This gentleman looks like he might have public comment. I'm not sure if he's. I think he's for B. B. Yep.
Okay, we're coming up on B.
We'll get there in just a minute.
Has to do with Jacob's well.
With what?
You'll be at the next public comment section.
Okay. That takes us to citizens' comments B. And I have a sign-up list. So this is for items other than those appearing on the agenda. And I have Charity Gadapi, who has left, Jerry Evans, who's left, I have Donald Davis. Left. And I have Reggae Wilson. Roger, I'm sorry. Mr. Wilson, would you like to come up and give us your name, spell your last name? Let us know what neighborhood you're in, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name's Roger Wilson. My last name is spelled Wilson.
Thank you.
I live on Coolidge Street in Salta, Alaska. The reason I'm here tonight is I understand that the borough wants to close down Jacob's Well because of taxes that are due. And the community has been using that well for a long time. My understanding, this is all I know, I don't know all the details, that property is leased to the Salta Fair Association. So I don't know how there's a tax that could be levied on it. But the well doesn't make that much money. We had a meeting, an impromptu meeting at the well this last Saturday. And we asked questions, and the people who've been maintaining the well and collecting the money and stuff told us, this is how I understood it, that the well on average makes about $500 a month. And the electric to run it is about $340. And then the well, public well, has to have testing. And so we pay for those services so we can keep it open. So apparently there's been taxes due for the past, say, 3 years that haven't been paid. I had no idea until last Saturday. So I would like whoever could look into this. So the wells it close on Monday. Monday is the last day that the well can operate, or Sunday. They're supposed to close on Monday, May 1st. So I don't know what the deal is, but that well's a real help to the people in that community. And if it closes, you're going to hurt people.
It looks like we have maybe someone over here that can give us some
We can give you a staff report on that. This isn't
Do you have
really
some technical information,
a new topic, and Mr. Williams can give you some technical information.
Right. So
I'll just caution, since we called it a staff report, that
not
we
a
don't have
staff
anything
report.
on our agenda. So yeah, it's just technical information and response.
Just what you can inform the assembly about.
Absolutely. So it's an interesting situation. So the borough entered into a lease agreement with the Salter Fair Association to lease a chunk of land out in the Salter area where the Salter Fair is at. It's designated as parkland owned by the borough, and the Salter Fair said they would like to operate that. We entered into a lease. There was folks from the Salta community a number of years ago that went out to get water from the spigot out there, and one way or another, they ended up putting a commercial water distribution system out there. Fast forward, our assessing department went out there and determined that even though they're leasing the land, that water operation is a commercial entity, and because it's commercial, it's a taxable entity. So there was an assessment made and a tax levied on that well. the taxes never got paid. They never got protested. The assessment amount never got protested. Just the taxes never got paid. So here we are. The well, to our knowledge, is uncompliant, to the best that we know. The taxes haven't been paid, so we're not in compliance with the lease agreement with the Salter Fair Association. So we contacted the Salter Fair board last summer and started the process and started discussions with them to figure out how we can get past this. It's been pretty much radio silence since then, and I instructed the land management department about 2 months ago to begin the foreclosure process and terminate the lease. With the termination of the lease would go the stand down of the well operation, because we don't have powers to operate a water utility as a borough function. And nor do I know, do I have confidence that, secondary, I don't have confidence that the well is compliant with, and it's safe to use by the local residents. Just recently, I was approached by a member of the Salter community who seems to be taking an interest in getting this straightened out, and I believe that she's sincere in her efforts. But however, we're running out of time, and we need to stick to some kind of timeline. I will be meeting with that person and maybe a couple people from that group on Friday or tomorrow or Monday. I can't remember the day. I just approved the meeting announcements. But basically, what we need to do is we need to figure out, and I'm working with land management, figure out what the terms of this lease are, or some kind of use agreement on that property. There's a number of artifacts surrounding that. They took 2 grants, one from DEC and another one through a legislative appropriation for a tractor. The grant, the water operation was funded through DEC. There's a number of moving parts in this problem. So my intention and the mayor's intention is to try to see that group be successful and provide that service. However, we have to be compliant with DEC requirements, and we want to make sure the borough interests are protected. So we know, sir, we know what's going on.
Yes, I understand that if it makes money, you want to tax it. But on the other hand, it doesn't make enough money to pay the taxes and operate. They pay money to have tests every month to ensure that water is of good quality, and that's not cheap. So if it's making $500 a month, that's about $6,000 a year. So it's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of money being exchanged there. Again, it's a community thing. So I would hope that we all prevail and the water would still be available to people.
So I suspect it might be best for you to chat with Mr. Williams. I can see if the assembly has any questions. I presume that pretty much concludes your testimony. Mr. Quist.
I have a question. I mean, for staff, more than the testifier, I mean, this assembly, let's say there was an overwhelming willingness of this whole body to do something for this well as soon as possible. I mean, is there any way that we could prevent it from closing? I'm guessing the answer is no, based on the facts that I've heard.
I think you're correct. I don't think there's anything in your control at the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Lawrence.
Can I ask a question?
No. But Mr. Lawrence can ask a question.
Well, it probably isn't your question. Mr. Williams, do you know how much property tax amount there is per year and how much is owed?
I don't know the total amounts per year because it got kind of, from 2015 till now, when you calculate penalties and interest and all the other variables, the aggregate of those years since then is around $2,500.
And it's the property owner, or at least the leasee, is the Salter Fair Association.
That's correct.
So, kind of our rules are that we listen to your testimony and then we ask for questions. And we're at the point where we're in the question-making mode, but I would suggest that Mr. Williams would be a good person to ask questions of, and we'll be adjourning soon, so we might be available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak? And thank you so much for waiting with us. I know it was a long night. Anybody else that wishes to speak on items not scheduled for public hearing? Seeing none, I'm going to close those and move to Assembly members' comments. But actually, we'll go back to item 10. Messages from the Borough Mayor. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything left to share with us?
Thank you. I'm trying to stay awake because I've been traveling, short on sleep. Right. So I did go back to Washington, D.C., and I met with the EPA for quite a while, and I also met with the Secretary of the Air Force, 2 different topics. Discussions with EPA, I think, went very well. I was surprised with the upper level administration at a national level of being incredibly well versed about Fairbanks, Alaska, and knowing our geography and who lives where, and understanding the complexity of the issue and the temperatures and the inversions and everything else that we have to deal with here. They were quite up to speed on it. They were also up to speed on the fact that some of their broad brush regulations don't fit our community well. And I found a willingness from them to try to be as creative as possible, as creative as they can be within the Clean Air Act, to try to find solutions to our PM 2.5 problem that suit our community. So it was encouraging. I was pleasantly surprised to have those discussions. We also chatted then with the Air Force about seeing what kind of assurances they might be able to provide regarding construction of new housing on base with the F-35s coming in here. Our private contractors are concerned that we potentially could have a replay of some things that happened at Fort Wainwright when they built housing after the community built housing to respond to a need there, and then the investments the private sector made turned out to not be good investments, and the banks weren't happy and the contractors weren't happy. So we're trying to avoid that going forward. It's difficult or challenging for the Department of Defense to try to come up with some sort of assurance of what the future might bring, but the Secretary of the Air Force had a clear understanding of the predicament that we're in and was going to see, after chatting their attorneys to see what kind of assurances they could provide. So we'll see where that goes. I'm somewhat hopeful that we'll be able to get something on that going forward. One quick comment on Tanana Lakes, and thank you for approving the package for the playground. I have had a number of people ask about why we would, when we're struggling for money to keep things going, why we would want to invest money out at Tanana Lakes as a new facility. And number one, I guess, first off, is this is not local money. This is grant money specific to those types of outdoor recreation facilities coming from Land and Water Conservation Fund. Requires a match, and the match is being provided by the Arctic Winter Games Host Society to do this project. There's also been just an overwhelming response from the public, both in participation out there. I mean, our visitation numbers are huge compared to just about any other facility in our system, as well as encouragement to complete more work on the master plan for that facility. So it is getting extensive community support, and this particular project is not local funding. However, that being said, after we build it, we will be needing to maintain it. And we know what kind of challenges that can bring down the road in a number of years. So we are cognizant of that and trying to be as careful as we can. This is a comparatively low maintenance type development, however, as far as investing more money in it down the road. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Quist has a question for you.
Mayor, in your conversations with EPA, did the topic of electrostatic precipitation come up at all for residential use?
We didn't get into that. We kind of ran out of time before we could get into the specifics on that. So no, we didn't chat with them.
Any other questions for the mayor? Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I forgot to mention, we got an award. Our risk management department got an award at the Family Friendly Workplace Awards the other day. And I know that seems funny since we kind of coordinate the program. However, the awards are chosen by a committee that we have no control or authority over whatsoever. So an independent third party said our risk management department was worthy of an award. And the mayor's office was also nominated, but we didn't win. I got beat out by risk management. What can I say?
Okay, our condolences. Any other questions for the mayor? Seeing none, that takes us to reports of special and standing committees. I'm just going to ask if anybody has a report. Raise your hand. Thank you, Mr. Quist.
So the Air Pollution Control Commission this month is still in their quasi-judicial mode. I don't know what the workload is like going forward for them, and the May agenda is yet to come out. So Sustainability Commission met earlier this month, hosting another open house, this time at Cold Climate Housing Research Center, and their next regular meeting next month will discuss the input that they gathered from that, and then also, they're going to continue to see if that's really the format, or the discussion, to continue the discussion, see if that's the format that they want to be sticking with, or maybe they want to adjust it to try to get input from the public in another way. The Sustainability Commission held a special meeting yesterday in order to discuss the proposed e-waste fees, and they created a memo which I don't think we received it today, but we'll be getting a memo from them on that. There was also a representative from IA Green Star who attended and gave their presentation without going into too much detail or drawing this out much longer. There was a lot of concern about the impact of the proposed fees, and the real short version is they're opposed to it, but if it was coupled with a prohibition on the dumping of e-waste, and it required the recycling of e-waste, they would potentially find it acceptable. And I'm happy to continue or answer questions if you'd like more detail, but that's it otherwise.
Okay, are the questions of Mr. Quist? Yes, Mr. Lawrence has a question.
Mr. Quist, my recollection is that the fee being proposed by administration is that commercial businesses that deliver more than 10 pieces of computers or whatever would have to pay. And my understanding from landfill people is that it's pretty, or from the recycling, I don't know where, but is that doesn't happen very often. They couldn't recall any business bringing in more than 10 computers at one time. Now that just came up, I think, last Saturday, so I assume your meeting was before then.
This was yesterday, last night.
Did you point that out?
Yeah, so
experience that no one can recall a business bringing in more than 10 computers at one time?
So I'm liaison there, so I really try to keep myself on a short leash, and provide. I tried to say as little as possible, but I did request. So yes, to answer your question about were they aware of it? They a couple of things. They asked for clarification on that 10 item. They wanted it spelled out so that it was per day, because maybe it's ambiguous on the sheet. But I did request, maybe this kind of answers your question, from both IA Green Star and from the administration, the recycling manager that was at the meeting, a breakdown of which user types and what types of quantities are they bringing in terms of e-waste, because IA Green Star had historical data, but it was just tonnage. At the meeting they had just tonnage. It didn't separate commercial users from residential users. It had nothing about like numbers of trips or loads. Kind of like Mr. Jordan when he came had a lot of detail. And as IA Green Star didn't have that, and the administration didn't have that at their fingertips at the meeting either. And being able to talk about these fees, the proposed impact on recycling and our budget, it's really hard to talk about that when you don't know what percent of this tonnage is commercial or not. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be getting all that information soon. I did request it.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else have a report on the Special or Standing Committee? Yes, Mr. Kaki.
The Economic Development Commission met on Tuesday afternoon. We got a presentation on how to implement regional SEDS programs from Brett Schwartz, I think was the name. It was a pretty good process, the presentation that we got from him, and also like the steps that we could take to implement or improve upon our SEDS, and sort of some discussions of whether to like use our current SEDS as a starting point, or whether to like scrap it and go start from scratch to actually build like a more community-inspired one. But there's a subcommittee that was formed to start looking into that now. So.
Super. Mr. Cooper.
No comments. I'll hold my hands up.
Okay. Just praying. Okay, and seeing no other reports of Special and Standing Committee, we're going to go back to our Assembly member comments. And I'll start with Ms. Major.
I will not be here next week. I leave tomorrow night and I'll be gone for the next 10 or so days, or almost 2 weeks. I'll be back in time for the May 10th.
Safe travel. Okay, Mr. Quist.
Thank you. Just very briefly on like this whole school district procedure, just like our interaction with the school district overall. Personally, I mean, I'd like to give the school district every absolute last penny that we reasonably can afford to. And like Mr. Lawrence said earlier, I haven't been part of this body many years, but the last 2 years I've been able, or rather 3 years prior to that, I was able to be part of this process. I, with others and Mr. Lawrence, did everything I could to increase the funding to the district. And our relationship now makes it very difficult for me to continue to do that. I mean, I'm going to be in a couple of weeks, advocating for this $50 million amount. But I guess I'll stop, and I just want to say on this topic that it's really unfortunate, our relationship, and I really would like to work to improve that. Otherwise, I'd just like to congratulate Bruce Hansen on being the 2018 Teacher of the Year for the school district and on his retirement. He's a wonderful person. He's been a real asset to the district and just, a stellar member of the community. And we shall be very proud and grateful to have him amongst us. Thank you.
Super. Mr. Cooper.
Well, everybody's probably tired of hearing me talk after the last 2 weeks, but a couple comments. One, along the lines of what Mr. Quist said, I think that it is important that we improve the relationship with the school district, not at the expense of having them be accountable, but at the expense of us getting on the same page about how all this is going to work. And these tensions have been going on for decades. I would think Ms. Dolan would argue they're built into the Alaska Constitution. So it's not something that we're easily going to surmount. But, there's value in talking to people. And I would challenge anybody on this body to go and talk to people. The reason that we had the Joint Special Assembly Finance Committee meeting is because I decided that I was going to call the superintendent and Heidi and say, these are the problems we're facing. This is the issue. You've got a lot of skeptics on the assembly. Let's talk about it. And to their credit, they agreed. And I feel like that for those who are observing that session, my observation was they got grilled pretty good, and they could continue to get grilled pretty good every time they come back in front of us. So, but as part of that, I went over to their office and I talked to them, and I asked them questions that I had, and they gave me answers. And I still have questions, but there's nothing that prevents any of us from making the effort to talk to any or all of the board members or folks on the administration. I encourage people to do that. The other comment I wanted to make: there's a gentleman here who I happened to talk to before because I got here an hour early. Don Davis, I understand, has a long going complaint about junk in roads and stuff like that. I'm sure the administration knows about Mr. Davis, but he left early. He was going to provide some citizens' comments. He did ask the clerks to copy and distribute his comments, so they're in your email. That's all.
Okay. Mr. Kaki.
Well, I feel like I have to make a comment also on the whole school district thing. I'm absolutely supportive of trying to fund education as best as we feasibly can. We're all in a tight budget situation both here and there, and so being able to pluck between each one, it's kind of a really difficult situation to be in. And it's just unfortunate how adversarial it seems to be at times, and I think more open communication can definitely lead to a better solution. And it sounds like there's been attempts, and it's just hard to come by. But I definitely am supportive of education entirely. I've got 2 kids who are going into the school system. My son's starting 1st grade next year, so it's something I actually do take very seriously, even though I might have seemed a little brash earlier.
Mr. Lejeski.
Well, not to the detriment of any other meetings or anyone's thoughts at those. I wanted to say that I particularly noticed today that I think every single person introduced some incredibly thoughtful ideas and statements to the conversation, and so I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you. Mr. Gray.
Yes, I agree that it's all about communication. And again, communicating before things become a bigger issue would be preferred. And lastly, I just want to thank Mr. Bartels for sticking that out with us. I think that he did a great job under some pretty tough questioning by this body. And I think that well, if it was his choice, he made the right decision to come and be here. If they chose him to come represent them tonight, it was still the right choice. So if he's listening, I just wanted to know that I appreciate him sticking that out with us and discussing all the points with us.
Mr. Lawrence.
Well, education is perhaps the most important function of local government, and yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Like, it's certainly in the top one or two, and so we need to do it right, and that's something we need to keep working at.
And I will echo most everybody's support or comments. Clearly, we support education, and this body has shown it by what it's funded every year I've been on it. It has been frustrating to watch us struggle to find money and then see it be saved. Not against saving things, but against that discussing the public policy of taxing people to plan for uncertain times. That said, I do understand how frustrating, or I can think I understand how frustrating it must be to be a body that has 3 funding bodies and no control, and that I can understand that working to try to soften that with a fund balance would make sense to me too. I'm grateful we've had this time, that I thank Mr. Cooper for organizing our finance work session, and to Mr. Bartels for staying this evening, and I believe that he played that role maybe a couple weeks ago too. And I know both bodies are committed to finding good solutions. I know both administrations are committed to providing good education and good quality to our community, and I trust that we can find a good way forward. Certainly a first step is to believe that we all have the best interests of the community and the students in mind. With that, our assembly schedule for the week of April 30. I know you're disappointed not to have a budget meeting Saturday, but Matt said no. So Thursday, May 3.
It's not too late.
Thursday, May 3rd, the Capital Projects and Legislative Priority Committee is meeting at noon in the Assembly chambers. And Thursday, May 3rd, they don't get enough. They're going to come back for a regular Assembly meeting at 6 p.m. in the Assembly chambers. And that will be our public hearing for the budget. With that, nothing else to go to the order. We're adjourned.